I had just settled into my chair after a long day, ready to enjoy my favorite TV show. It was one of the few simple pleasures I allowed myself, a routine that kept the chaos of the world at bay. Just as the story was getting interesting, the door slammed open, and my wife stormed in like a whirlwind. Without a word, she snatched the remote from my hand and turned off the television. I sat back, arms crossed, waiting for an explanation. "We have a problem," she announced, her voice sharp with frustration. I took a moment, studying her expression. "What kind of problem?" I asked. Her tone suggested it was something dire, but the way she paced the room told me it was more personal than urgent. She stopped in front of me and crossed her arms, her frustration pouring out in a flood of words. Apparently, her friend, someone I only vaguely knew, had landed a high-paying job despite having no relevant experience. The injustice of it all was apparently compounded by my supposed lack of support for her ambitions. I raised a hand to slow her down. "Hold on," I said. "First of all, the world doesn't revolve around you. Second, let's get some facts straight. What kind of job does she have?" That question seemed to stop her for a moment. She admitted, somewhat reluctantly, that she didn't know. Her friend hadn't shared any details, claiming the nature of the work was very secretive. I couldn't help but smirk at that. It sounded like the kind of vague explanation people use when they don't want to be questioned. "So, let me get this straight," I said. "You're upset over something you don't fully understand, and you're blaming me for not magically fixing it?" She glared at me, but before she could fire back, I offered a suggestion. "Invite her over. She's always been a bit loose-lipped after a few glasses of wine. Maybe you'll get the answers you're looking for." To my surprise, she paused, considering the idea. After a moment, her expression shifted from frustration to something closer to enthusiasm. "You know," she said, "that might actually work. If I get her talking, maybe I can figure out if there's a way for me to get a foot in the door." I nodded, satisfied that I'd steered the conversation toward something productive. If nothing else, it would give me a reprieve from her venting. "But," I added, "if she's making a lot of money with no experience, don't you think there's a chance it's not all on the level?" That comment gave her pause, but only briefly. She argued that her friend's family had money, so maybe it was just a matter of connections. I shrugged. "Could be. Either way, it's worth finding out before you waste any more energy being upset about it." By now, she was fully on board with the plan. She grabbed her phone and started dialing her friend's number. I leaned back in my chair, content to let her take the lead. As much as I dislike being dragged into these dramas, there was a part of me that was genuinely curious. What kind of job could pay so well and remain so secretive? When she hung up the phone, she looked at me with a triumphant smile. Her friend had agreed to come over the next day. I nodded and reached for the remote, ready to pick up where I'd left off with my show. But as I settled back in, a thought lingered in the back of my mind: what kind of work was this friend really involved in? It didn't sit right with me, but I'd wait to hear more before making any judgments. My wife took the preparation for her friend's visit more seriously than I had anticipated. She went out early in the day and came back with a bottle of wine, her friend's favorite, apparently, and ordered a pizza from the place that always seemed overpriced to me. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I could tell she was determined to make the evening perfect. Her energy was palpable, and she darted around the kitchen, setting the table and adjusting every little detail. It wasn't like her to be this meticulous, but I figured she had her reasons. When her friend arrived, I couldn't help but notice how overdressed she was. High heels, a flashy dress, and enough makeup to make her look ready for a gala rather than a casual evening at home. My wife greeted her enthusiastically, ushering her in like she was royalty. Before I could even think about joining the conversation, my wife turned to me with a sweet but firm tone. "Honey, why don't you go relax in the other room? We'll just chat for a bit." I got the message loud and clear: my presence wasn't needed, yet. I retreated to the living room, letting the sound of their voices filter through the walls. They talked about everything under the sun, from mutual friends to some celebrity gossip that I had no interest in. After about half an hour, the laughter grew louder, and I figured it was time to make my entrance. When I walked into the dining room, the wine bottle was nearly empty, and both women looked a little too pleased with themselves. "Sounds like you're having fun," I said casually, taking a seat. My wife's friend turned to me with a smile that was just a touch too wide. I decided to cut to the chase. "So, what's this mysterious job you have?" My wife's been dying to know. My tone was light, almost joking, but I kept my eyes on her. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned in as if she were about to share a state secret. "All right," she said, lowering her voice. "But you can't tell anyone. It's an investment company. We deal with very wealthy clients who need privacy. My job is pretty straightforward. I handle calls, schedule appointments, and make sure everything runs smoothly. The company prides itself on being discreet. It's all about protecting the client's assets and ensuring their income is clean and untouchable." She paused, her eyes darting to my wife as if gauging her reaction. "Sounds interesting," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Must be a lot of responsibility." She nodded, then quickly changed the subject. "By the way, isn't your birthday coming up soon?" she asked my wife, her tone suddenly light and cheerful. My wife beamed and nodded, confirming that it was only 2 weeks away. The conversation shifted entirely after that. The friend teased my wife about getting ready for a big surprise. "Just you wait," she said, her tone almost conspiratorial. "You'll love it." My wife's curiosity was piqued instantly, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Whatever this surprise was, it had her more excited than I'd seen her in a long time. As the evening wound down, I kept my thoughts to myself. Something about the whole situation still didn't sit right with me, but I figured there was no point in pressing the issue now. When the friend's ride arrived, my wife walked her to the door, practically glowing with excitement. They hugged, exchanged promises to talk soon, and then the friend was gone. The moment the door closed, my wife turned to me with wide eyes and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. "What do you think it is?" she asked, practically bouncing on her heels. I shrugged, playing it cool, but she wasn't having it. She spent the next hour guessing and speculating, her energy filling the house. Whatever was coming, she was determined to figure it out before the big day. A few days had passed since the evening with my wife's friend, and things were back to normal, or as normal as they could be. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from her friend. I was a bit surprised, considering I rarely heard from her directly. "Hey," she began, her voice unusually cheerful. "I know you're planning your wife's birthday celebration, but I was wondering if you could move it to the day after. It'll be worth it, trust me." Her request caught me off guard, and I asked her why. "Let's just say there's an important opportunity related to that job she's been so curious about. It'll make her day even more special." I agreed, but not without a bit of skepticism. "All right," I said. "We can move the celebration, but this better be good." She laughed and assured me it would be. After the call, I relayed the information to my wife, who immediately lit up with excitement. She didn't even question the change in plans, already envisioning what this important opportunity might be. Her enthusiasm was infectious, though I kept my reservations to myself. When her birthday arrived, I gave her a gift in the morning as planned, something I had put a lot of thought into. She was delighted, showering me with thanks and affection, but her mind was clearly on the dinner we were set to attend later. As evening approached, we dressed for the occasion, and she practically buzzed with anticipation. The restaurant her friend had chosen was far more upscale than any place we'd usually visit, the kind of spot where you wouldn't feel out of place in a suit and tie. When we arrived, her friend was already there, waiting near the entrance with a man I hadn't seen before. She introduced him as her partner, and they exchanged pleasantries with my wife before leading us to a private room. Inside, a few well-dressed individuals were waiting. The atmosphere was formal but oddly relaxed, as though these people were used to meetings like this. My wife's friend wasted no time getting to the point. "Your wife has impressed me," she said, addressing the room. "She's smart, organized, and knows how to lead." Exactly what we need for our growing team. The others nodded in agreement, and one of the men, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, turned to my wife. We've been told you're great at managing people, and we're looking for someone to bring order to a few areas where things have gotten a bit chaotic. He smiled. Do you think you're up for it? My wife, her eyes shining, didn't hesitate. Absolutely, she said. That's something I'm confident I can handle. They seemed pleased with her answer, but quickly moved on to the terms of the job. You'll need to leave your current position, another man explained. At first, you'll be working unofficially while we finalize some paperwork. It's a technicality, but it's how we ensure things move quickly for the right candidates. I couldn't help but feel a pang of suspicion. Why unofficial? I asked, keeping my tone polite but firm. Isn't this supposed to be a high-end organization? Why not just follow standard procedures? One of the men nodded, seemingly expecting the question. It's simple, he said. We're a large company, and the formal hiring process can take months. By starting unofficially, you skip the red tape and get to work immediately. My wife barely needed convincing. The idea of diving straight into an exciting new role clearly appealed to her. I'll do it, she said enthusiastically. I'll resign from my current job and start as soon as you need me. They exchanged smiles and nods, and then one of them leaned in slightly. Great, he said. Because we have a very special assignment in mind for you. Details will follow soon. The whole exchange left me uneasy. While my wife was clearly over the moon, something about the arrangement didn't sit right with me. A personal assignment from the boss on the first day? I thought to myself. That's odd, to say the least. The day of the big celebration finally arrived, and it turned out to be even more eventful than I had expected. My wife decided to make a statement at her now former workplace before officially closing that chapter of her life. From what she had told me, the office environment was toxic to the point of absurdity. Petty arguments over trivial things, like who used the last roll of toilet paper, were common. So, in her signature fashion, she prepared farewell gifts for each of her adversaries, rolls of toilet paper neatly wrapped with ribbons. It was her way of delivering a pointed goodbye, sharp, but undeniably clever. By the time she left the office, she was practically glowing. Her exit had been as dramatic as it was satisfying, and she couldn't stop recounting the reactions of her former co-workers as we made final preparations for the party. I had gone all out for this celebration, renting a yacht for the evening and ensuring that there was more than enough food and drink to keep everyone happy. Friends of ours from all walks of life had been invited, making it a lively and diverse crowd. Everyone seemed ready to celebrate my wife's new chapter. As the guests arrived, the mood was electric. My wife's friend, the one who had been instrumental in her job opportunity, showed up fashionably late with her boyfriend in tow. I recognized him as the man we had met at the restaurant, and while he was polite enough, there was something about him that didn't sit well with me. His designer suit and carefully groomed appearance seemed out of place among our more casual and genuine crowd. They both stood out, not just because of their appearance, but also because of how they carried themselves, like they were sizing everyone up. As the evening progressed, I couldn't help but notice that the boyfriend kept finding excuses to pull my wife aside. Each time, he claimed it was for an urgent discussion about work. I watched them closely, but from a distance, not wanting to cause a scene. When the interruptions became too frequent to ignore, I approached her friend and asked, "What's the deal with your boyfriend? Why does he keep dragging my wife away from her own party?" She waved me off with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, don't worry about it. It's just work stuff. He's very particular about these things." I raised an eyebrow, not entirely convinced. "If I were you," I said, "I'd be concerned about how he's looking at her. It's not exactly professional." She rolled her eyes and told me to relax. "It's nothing. They'll be done soon." Still, I kept a close eye on them. Eventually, my wife returned to the main party, her expression light and carefree. "All good," she said with a quick smile. "I'll explain later. Let's just enjoy the night." That was enough to ease my immediate concerns, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. For now, though, I decided to take her at her word. With the minor distractions behind us, the party regained its momentum. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and the yacht's deck was alive with conversation and laughter. I focused on making sure our guests were having a good time, chatting with friends and catching up with people we hadn't seen in ages. My wife, meanwhile, seemed to be the center of attention, her energy and excitement infectious to everyone around her. As the evening wound down, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come in the past few weeks. While there were still unanswered questions about her new job and the people involved, tonight wasn't the time to dwell on them. She was happy, and for now, that was enough. Later, when we were back home, I asked her again about the discussion she'd had with her friend's boyfriend. She brushed it off with a casual smile. "It's all good," she repeated. "I'll tell you more later." Her confidence was reassuring, and I decided to let it go. Whatever it was, we'd deal with it together. For now, the celebration continued in our memories, a reminder of the steps we were taking toward something new. The weekend finally arrived, giving me a much-needed break from work. My wife, on the other hand, was preparing for her first day at her new job. As she got ready, I couldn't help but notice her outfit. It was more revealing than what she usually wore, and it caught me off guard. "Why are you dressed like that?" I asked, my tone neutral but firm. She smiled as she adjusted her necklace. "I just want to look my best on my first day. It's important to make a good impression." Before I could say anything else, she grabbed her bag and hurried out the door, leaving me to my thoughts. I shrugged it off and went about my morning routine, thinking about how eager she seemed. About half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened the door cautiously. Standing there was an old friend of mine from university, someone I hadn't seen in years. We exchanged greetings, and I invited him inside. It was a surprise, but a welcome one. He looked well, better than I remembered, actually. He'd always been the guy who took risks, and from what I'd heard, those risks had finally paid off. As we sat down, he started reminiscing about our college days. He'd been obsessed with cryptocurrency back then, spending endless hours analyzing graphs and market trends. While I had focused on building a stable career in IT, he had gambled everything on the volatile crypto market. Apparently, it had worked out for him. He leaned back in his chair and grinned. "I'm doing all right now. No wife, no kids, but I've got freedom. That's worth something, right?" I nodded, though I couldn't say I envied his lifestyle. Stability and family meant more to me. Then, out of nowhere, he brought up a topic that caught me completely off guard. "Have you ever heard of these VIP clubs? The kind where they have private rooms and holes, let's just say some girls give unique services?" He went on to describe a place he'd recently visited, complete with details I could have done without. I shook my head. "Not my thing," I said flatly. He laughed, as if my response was predictable. "Good," he said. "You've got a good wife. No need for distractions like that." His words were meant as a compliment, but the whole conversation left a sour taste in my mouth. After about an hour, he stood up to leave. "I'll be in town for a while," he said as he shook my hand. "Let's catch up again soon." I nodded and saw him to the door, relieved to have the house to myself again. His visit had been unexpected, and while it was good to see him, I couldn't shake the odd feeling his stories had left behind. Not long after he left, my phone rang. It was my wife. She sounded cheerful, though a little rushed. "Hey, just wanted to let you know we're having a corporate event tonight. I'll be home late." I told her it was fine and not to worry. She thanked me and hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts once again. I glanced at the clock, realizing I had the rest of the day to myself. The idea of diving into a project crossed my mind, but the comfort of my favorite TV show was far more tempting. Might as well make the most of the peace and quiet, I thought. Settling into my chair, I grabbed the remote and prepared to enjoy a rare, uninterrupted evening. When my wife came home that night, it was clear she'd had a bit too much to drink. She stumbled through the door, her face flushed with excitement. "It was amazing," she announced, practically singing her words. "The team is so young and energetic, and we all hit it off right away. It's going to be great working with them." I nodded, letting her enthusiasm wash over me. "That's good to hear," I said, keeping my tone even. "But what about that special assignment you mentioned? And the details of the job? Anything new there?" She waved a hand dismissively as she plopped onto the couch. "Oh, that. Well, they said I'll need to stay late for the next few weeks. You know, to learn the ropes and get a feel for how everything works. It's all part of onboarding," she said with a shrug. Her casual tone didn't match the weight of her words, but I decided to let it slide for now. "All right," I replied, "as long as it's worth it." She grinned and raised a hand in mock salute. "Trust me, it will be." True to her word, she started coming home later and later every evening. At first, it was just an hour, but soon it stretched to 2 or more. She'd always come in tired but happy, talking about how much she was learning and how exciting it all was. I couldn't help but notice how quickly she had immersed herself in this new role. It was like she had found a spark that had been missing for a long time. While I appreciated her enthusiasm, I couldn't ignore the slight unease creeping into the back of my mind. One evening, about a week into her new schedule, she came home practically glowing. "Guess what?" she said, holding up an envelope. "They gave me an advance." She tore it open with a flourish and pulled out a check. The amount was impressive, especially for someone who'd only been on the job for a week. "Isn't it amazing?" she asked, her eyes shining. I nodded, though I couldn't help but wonder why a company would give such a large advance so early on. She was already planning what to do with the money. "I'm going to save this for something special," she said, grabbing a jar from the kitchen and labeling it Dream Fund. She tucked the jar away on a high shelf in the pantry, out of sight but not out of mind. Later, I happened to catch a glimpse of her putting more cash into the jar. It wasn't just the advance, she already had a significant amount saved up. I decided not to say anything, figuring she'd tell me when the time was right. At dinner, I brought up the subject of her employment status. "What's the deal with your official hiring?" I asked. "Are they making any progress?" She shook her head, her expression remaining cheerful. "They're still working on it. Big companies have a lot of red tape, you know. But it's fine. They promised everything will be sorted soon." Her confidence was unshakable, but I couldn't help feeling skeptical. Something about the situation didn't sit right with me. Before bed, she mentioned something that caught my attention. "By the way, my boss said they might have a big assignment for me soon." "Something really special," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. "It'll be a great opportunity." I asked for details, but she just smiled and shrugged. "I'll know more when they call. For now, it's just exciting to think about." Her optimism was infectious, even if I didn't fully understand what was going on. As we turned in for the night, I decided to hold off on asking more questions. Whatever this special assignment was, I'd find out soon enough. For now, it seemed best to let her enjoy the moment. The morning started with my wife's phone ringing incessantly. She picked it up quickly and launched into a long conversation. I couldn't make out much from her tone, part excitement, part seriousness, but the length of the call caught my attention. I watched as she paced the room, occasionally nodding and laughing softly at whatever was being said on the other end. After a good 20 minutes, I couldn't resist anymore. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She ended the call and turned to me with a wide smile. "You won't believe it," she said. "They're sending me on a business trip. And guess who's coming with me? My friend. Isn't that amazing?" Her enthusiasm was undeniable, but I felt a twinge of skepticism. "A business trip? With your friend?" "That's unusual," I replied, choosing my words carefully. She brushed off my concern with a wave of her hand. "It's perfect. It'll be great to have her there, and we'll get so much done together. It's only for 4 days, so don't miss me too much, she teased. I nodded, still processing the information. All right, I said. Have a good trip. The following day passed uneventfully until I got a call from an old friend. His voice was casual at first, but it quickly shifted to something more serious. Hey, I'm at that VIP club I told you about, he said. You're not going to believe this, but I think I saw your wife here. My grip on the phone tightened. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice low and firm. He hesitated before continuing. You remember back in college when she lost that poker bet and got that tattoo on her ankle? Well, let's just say someone here matches the description exactly. I felt my stomach drop. You're sure? I asked. He sighed. I can't be 100%, but it looks a lot like her. Same tattoo, same everything. My mind raced as I tried to process what he was saying. Get me proof, I said, my tone sharp. I need to know for sure. He hesitated. I'm not supposed to take pictures in here, he said. My patience snapped. I don't care, I said, raising my voice. Just do it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it to find a grainy but unmistakable photo. The tattoo was there, as was the piercing she'd gotten a few years back. She lay in a hole and cheated on me with some guy in a jacket. There was no mistaking it. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. My mind went blank for a moment before a cold, simmering anger settled in. So that's what this business trip is about, I thought. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I wasn't about to confront her over the phone. No, this needed to be handled carefully. I needed a plan. If she thought she could deceive me, she was sorely mistaken. I'd been patient, supportive even, but this was crossing a line I couldn't ignore. For the rest of the day, I went through the motions, keeping my emotions in check. Every interaction with others felt distant, as if I were watching myself from the outside. Inside, I was already mapping out my next steps. There was no room for rash decisions, only calculated actions. By the time evening came, my resolve was solid. This wasn't just about what I'd seen in that photo. It was about trust, respect, and the foundation of our marriage. If she thought she could undermine that, she had another thing coming. For now, though, I'd let her believe everything was fine. Let her think she'd gotten away with it. But I knew better. This isn't over, I thought to myself. Not by a long shot. With my wife away on her so-called business trip, I had the house to myself. The lingering anger and betrayal from the night before hadn't subsided, and I knew I needed to take action. The first thing I did was search the house for the jar she'd labeled as her dream fund. It didn't take long to find it tucked away behind some cans in the pantry. Pulling it out, I saw it was filled with cash, far more than I'd expected. The date written on the jar matched exactly when she'd started her new job. My suspicion grew deeper as I realized she had been hiding more than just the money. I sat down at the kitchen table and counted the cash. It was a significant amount, far more than could be explained by a simple advance. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What struck me the most was that, since she wasn't officially employed, she had no legal claim to these funds. If the money went missing, there would be no official record to prove its existence or its loss. That realization cemented my decision. I took every last bill, carefully packed it into an envelope, and drove to my parents' house to store it safely. Once the money was out of the house, I felt a small measure of relief. But this was only the first step. On the drive back home, I called a lawyer, someone I trusted to handle sensitive matters discreetly. When he picked up, I explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out the more salacious details for now. I want to start divorce proceedings, I said firmly. But it has to be done quietly. She can't know until everything is ready. He assured me it could be arranged, but he also advised that we'd need to bide our time to ensure the process went smoothly. His advice made sense, and I agreed to follow it. However, as I hung up the phone, a new thought occurred to me. If her new job and this business trip were part of something shady, I couldn't just let it slide. Not only for my sake, but because whatever she was involved in could have wider implications. That's when I decided to escalate things. If what I suspected was true, there were authorities who needed to know. Back at home, I sat down at my desk and composed an anonymous email to the local police department. I kept the message short and to the point, outlining what I believed about the so-called VIP club she'd been connected to. "This isn't a club," I wrote. "It's a front for a brothel. Wealthy clients, secret rooms, illegal activities, it's all there. You need to investigate." I didn't include any personal details, ensuring the report couldn't be traced back to me. After sending the email, I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore, it was about justice. If even half of what I suspected was true, this wasn't just a personal issue, it was a criminal one. I knew the police might take time to act, but at least I had done my part to bring the truth to light. As the day wore on, I stayed focused on the next steps. The divorce proceedings needed to be handled meticulously, and I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. My lawyer's words echoed in my mind: patience was key. Still, knowing I had already taken the first steps gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. By the time evening came, I had a plan in motion. The money was secure, the legal wheels were turning, and the authorities were notified. I couldn't predict how everything would unfold, but I was prepared to see it through. As I sat down to dinner alone, I thought about the chain of events that had led me to this point. One thing was clear: this wasn't just about me anymore. The stakes were far higher than I'd imagined. Knowing the storm that was bound to come, I decided to take preemptive action. I called my wife early that morning, keeping my tone light and casual. "Hey," I said, "just wanted to let you know I've been called away for a work trip. It's out of town and will last a couple of days, so I won't be around. Just wanted to keep you updated." She seemed a little distracted, but she responded with a vague acknowledgement before ending the call. It was just as well. I needed her to believe I wasn't around to deal with what was about to happen. I packed a small bag and drove to my parents' house. It was comforting to be in a familiar place, surrounded by people I could trust. Over dinner, I kept the conversation light, not wanting to involve them in the details of what was unfolding. Meanwhile, I kept my phone nearby, knowing it wouldn't be long before my wife realized the money was missing. Sure enough, my instincts were right. The first call came in the early afternoon. Her voice was shaky and filled with panic. "You won't believe what happened," she said, barely holding back tears. "I've been fired. And it's not just me, the police came and took my boss away. Everything's falling apart." I kept my response measured, offering a simple, "That's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that." She went on about how unfair it all was, but I didn't give her much to work with. "I'm not in town right now," I reminded her. "Let's talk about it when I get back." A couple of hours later, the second call came. This time, her tone was more accusatory. "Where's the jar?" she demanded. "The one I kept in the pantry. It's gone." I played dumb, feigning confusion. "Jar? What jar? I don't know what you're talking about." She didn't buy it, pressing further, but I cut her off. "I'm busy right now," I said firmly. "We can talk later." Before she could argue, I ended the call. It was clear she was unraveling, and while part of me felt a twinge of guilt, I reminded myself why I was doing this. She had crossed too many lines, and now she was facing the consequences of her own actions. I stayed at my parents' house for the rest of the day, keeping my phone on silent to avoid further interruptions. That evening, I sat down to assess the situation. Her job was gone, the shady operation she was involved in was under investigation, and she was left scrambling to figure out what to do next. My plan was working exactly as intended, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down yet. There were still a few more steps to take before everything was finalized. The next day, I received another call from her. This time, she sounded more desperate than angry. She begged me to come home, insisting that we needed to talk in person. I stayed firm, repeating that I was out of town for work and couldn't come back yet. "We'll figure everything out when I return," I said, keeping my tone neutral. As I hung up, I felt a sense of resolution. The pieces were falling into place, and the end was in sight. My focus now was on executing the final steps of my plan with precision. There was no turning back, and I was determined to see it through to the end. It was a relief when my lawyer called with good news. The divorce process was moving forward smoothly, and everything was falling into place. "You've got nothing to worry about," he said. "Most of the assets are protected since they were acquired before the marriage. Legally, she doesn't have much of a claim to them. The documents are ready, all you need to do is sign them and deliver them to her." I thanked him, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was time to finalize this chapter and move on. Later that day, I collected the finalized divorce papers from the lawyer's office. The thick envelope represented months of planning, frustration, and hard decisions. Instead of handing them over casually, I decided to add a touch of finality. I stopped by a store on the way home and bought a gift box and some ribbon. If she was going to receive the end of our marriage, it would come wrapped like the conclusion it was. Back at home, I carefully placed the papers inside the box, tied it with a bow, and called a courier service. The delivery was scheduled for later that evening. It was a strange moment, knowing that this act would officially end everything between us. I had no second thoughts. Her actions had made this decision inevitable, and I was resolute in my choice. When the courier picked up the package, I gave them clear instructions to deliver it directly to her. I didn't want any room for delays or excuses. With the package out of my hands, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. It felt like the final step in regaining control of my life. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was her. The second I answered, I was met with a mix of sobs and shouting. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "You can't be serious." I remained calm, letting her vent. When she paused to catch her breath, I responded evenly. "It's exactly what it looks like. You can keep doing whatever you want, but it won't be with me anymore." My words only seemed to fuel her anger. She began crying harder, her tone shifting between desperation and fury. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You have no idea what you're doing. This isn't over." I stayed silent, letting her rant without interruption. Her words didn't sting, they only reinforced my decision. When she realized I wasn't going to engage, she hung up, leaving me with nothing but the sound of the dial tone. Sitting there in the quiet, I reflected on how far things had come. Her tears and anger were predictable, but they didn't shake me. The marriage had become a toxic weight, and now I was free of it. Still, her parting words stuck with me. "This isn't over," she had said. It sounded like a threat, but it also felt empty, like a last-ditch effort to cling to something already gone. Despite her dramatic response, I knew this was the right decision. There was no going back. The chapter was closed, and I had taken every step necessary to protect myself and my future. Whatever came next, I would be ready for it. For now, I let the quiet of the evening settle around me, knowing I had done what needed to be done. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with calm determination. My lawyer had prepared me well, and I knew exactly what to expect. As the proceedings began, my wife launched into a tirade of accusations. She painted me as an abuser, claiming I had mistreated her emotionally and even physically. Her words were dramatic, her delivery rehearsed, but I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this and had come armed with the truth. When it was my turn to respond, I kept my composure. My lawyer presented a stack of evidence, text messages, emails, financial records, and even character statements from friends and family. Each piece systematically dismantled her claims. The courtroom grew quieter as the truth emerged, her web of lies unraveling under scrutiny. She had no solid proof to back her accusations, and the judge's patience with her theatrics was visibly wearing thin. By the time the hearing ended, the verdict was clear. The court ruled in my favor, dismissing her allegations entirely. She left the courtroom in a storm of frustration, while I walked out feeling vindicated. It wasn't about winning, it was about protecting my integrity and ensuring that the truth prevailed. My lawyer congratulated me on the outcome, but I knew this was only part of the battle. With the divorce finalized, I wasted no time in putting the past behind me. Selling the house was my next step. It had too many memories tied to it, most of which I wanted to leave behind. The process went smoothly, and within weeks, I had closed the sale and moved closer to my parents. Being near them felt like the right choice, a chance to rebuild my life with a strong support system nearby. One of the perks of my profession was the ability to work remotely, which made the transition easier. My new home was modest but comfortable, and it gave me the fresh start I needed. I settled into a routine quickly, focusing on my work and reconnecting with old friends in the area. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace and stability. However, peace didn't mean I could completely escape the aftermath. Friends began reaching out with strange stories. Apparently, my ex-wife had been contacting them, asking for information about me. She wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, and whether I was seeing anyone new. The desperation in her actions was almost pitiable, but it also left me uneasy. I tried to ignore the rumors at first, chalking them up to her inability to let go. But as the calls and messages from friends continued, it became clear that she was actively searching for me. Her persistence was unsettling, and I couldn't help but wonder what her endgame was. Was it revenge? Reconciliation? Something else entirely? As I sat in my quiet new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Her behavior was unpredictable, and while I had no intention of letting her back into my life, I couldn't ignore the potential for trouble. For now, all I could do was stay vigilant and hope that whatever she was planning would come to nothing. The day started like any other, quiet and uneventful, until the sound of knocking at the door disrupted the calm. I opened it to find my ex-wife standing there, flanked by 2 police officers. She wasted no time launching into a tirade, her voice raised and accusatory. "You stole my money," she yelled. "Where is it? Where did you hide the jar?" Her face was flushed with anger, but I remained calm, crossing my arms as I stood in the doorway. "What money?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "We're divorced, remember? Everything was settled in the divorce agreement." My words only seemed to fuel her frustration. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You took it. There was a jar, and I know you hid it somewhere in this house." One of the officers stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "Sir, we're here to follow up on her claims. Do you mind if we take a look around?" I nodded without hesitation. "Go ahead," I said. "I have nothing to hide." The officers entered and began their search, moving methodically from room to room. Meanwhile, my ex-wife stood in the living room, muttering under her breath. I leaned against the wall, watching her with a mix of disbelief and annoyance. It was almost surreal to see how far she was willing to go in her desperation. The search didn't take long. My house wasn't large, and there were few places to hide anything significant. The officers checked closets, drawers, and even under the furniture. When they finished, they returned to the living room and shook their heads. "There's nothing here," one of them said. "We've conducted a thorough search, and we couldn't find anything resembling the item you described." My ex-wife's face twisted with frustration. "It has to be here," she insisted. "He's lying. He must have hidden it somewhere else." The second officer, clearly growing tired of the situation, turned to her. "Do you have any proof that these funds existed in the first place? Do you have bank statements, employment records, or anything else to corroborate your claim?" That was the moment her entire argument fell apart. She stammered, unable to produce a single piece of evidence. The truth was unavoidable, her money was unaccounted for, and her lack of official employment meant she had no legal claim or documentation to support her story. The officers exchanged glances before one of them gently took her arm. "We've done all we can here. Let's go." As they escorted her out, she turned back to me, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and defeat. "This isn't over," she said, her voice shaking. I didn't respond. I simply watched as they left, the door closing behind them. The silence that followed was profound, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of finality. In the days and weeks that followed, I heard nothing more from her. It was as though she had vanished from my life entirely. Whatever plans she had to continue her pursuit of the non-existent jar had evaporated. I settled into my new routine, enjoying the peace and stability that had been missing for so long. For me, life moved on, finally free of the chaos she had brought.
Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know one fact about your city or town that only local would know. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Herbert Gregory's polished Oxford shoes clicked against the marble floor of Maxwell Industries' executive wing, his reflection crisp in the spotless surface beneath. At 45, he cut an imposing figure, 6'2", shoulders straight from his college rowing days, and a jawline that hadn't softened despite his corporate success. The morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows caught the silver threading through his dark hair, adding gravitas to his appearance rather than age. "Good morning, Mr. Gregory," called out junior executives as he passed, their eager smiles masking calculation. He nodded, maintaining the perfect balance of accessibility and authority he'd cultivated over his 15-year rise through the ranks. As senior executive vice president overseeing a $2 billion division, he'd learned that perception was currency in these halls. His secretary Candace Matthews stood as he approached his office, her blonde hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. "Your 9 a.m. was pushed to 10, sir." Mr. Delgado requested the change. Something flickered behind her eyes. Concern? Fear? Before she smoothed her expression. "James needs to learn that reorganizing my schedule doesn't make him more important," Herbert remarked, noting how Candace flinched at the mention of the vice president's name. "Any other changes I should know about?" Mrs. Gregory called. "She'll be attending the Maxwell Foundation dinner tonight after all. She said she made some promising connections at last week's charity auction." Herbert paused at his office door. Christina had originally begged off tonight's event, claiming a migraine. Did she now? Interesting. He caught Candace's reflection in the glass, saw her hands trembling slightly as she arranged papers on her desk. "Thank you, Candace. Hold my calls until the Delgado meeting." Inside his office, Herbert settled behind his mahogany desk, the Manhattan skyline spread before him like a kingdom. His recent promotions had come surprisingly easily, too easily, perhaps. The thought nagged at him as he reviewed quarterly projections, his mind drifting to Christina's sudden interest in corporate networking. A knock interrupted his musings. Philip Summers, Maxwell Industries' owner and Herbert's mentor, filled the doorway with his commanding presence. At 70, the billionaire industrialist moved with the energy of a man half his age. "Got a minute, Herbert?" Philip's steel-gray eyes swept the office. "Walk with me." They rode the private elevator to the rooftop garden, Philip's preferred location for sensitive conversations. The autumn wind whipped at their suit jackets as they strolled past meticulously maintained topiaries. "Your division's numbers are impressive," Philip began, "but something feels off. James Delgado's been making noise about irregularities in contract negotiations." Herbert's spine stiffened. "James has been difficult since my last promotion." Difficult is one word for it. Philip stopped, turning to face his proc. "I've been watching him." "And your wife, Christina?" Herbert kept his voice neutral, though his pulse quickened. "She's become quite the social butterfly at company events. Very friendly with certain executives." Philip's expression hardened. "I'm conducting a quiet investigation. Trust no one until it's complete. Not even those closest to you." The warning hung in the crisp autumn air. Herbert nodded, pieces clicking into place. Candace's strange behavior, Christina's newfound networking enthusiasm, James's barely concealed smugness during meetings. "Thank you for the heads up," Herbert said carefully. "I assume you'll let me know what you find?" "You'll be the first to know." Philip clapped him on the shoulder. "Your CEO material, Herbert. Don't let anyone compromise that." Back in his office, Herbert observed the daily drama of corporate life with new eyes. He watched James Delgado swagger past his door, caught the predatory gleam in the vice president's dark eyes. James was handsome in a conventional way, tall, dark, gym-sculpted physique obvious even in bespoke suits. The kind of man who peaked in college and never got over it. "Mr. Gregory?" Candace appeared in his doorway. "Your son's school called. Lucas won his debate competition." "Excellent." Herbert allowed himself a moment of genuine pride. At 14, Lucas showed promise of surpassing both his parents intellectually. And Amy? Still maintaining her 4.0 GPA. According to Mrs. Gregory's update this morning, Candace shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, about tonight's meeting with the Asian investors. What about it?" "The conference room's being renovated. Unexpectedly. Perhaps you should reschedule?" Herbert studied his secretary's face. 10 years of loyal service, and suddenly she couldn't meet his eyes. "No need. We'll use my office." "But, sir, my office will be fine, Candace." His tone left no room for argument. She retreated, defeat evident in her shoulders. The day unfolded like a chess match. Herbert noticed Christina's perfume lingering in the executive washroom hours after her supposed lunch meeting with potential donors. He observed James adjusting his tie with unusual satisfaction after emerging from the same area. Small details, easily dismissed individually, formed a damning pattern. During the afternoon board meeting, Herbert watched Christina and James through hooded eyes. His wife of 18 years sat 3 seats down, her auburn hair catching the light as she leaned forward to make a point about community engagement. At 42, she still turned heads, something she'd been leveraging more frequently at corporate events. James reached for the water pitcher at the same moment as Christina. Their fingers brushed, lingered. A smile passed between them, intimate and knowing. Herbert's mouth tightened imperceptibly. The Williams contract, Herbert interrupted their moment, seems to have been processed unusually quickly. "James, perhaps you could explain the expedited timeline?" James's smile faltered slightly. "Just good networking, Herbert. You know how it is. Right connections, right time." "Indeed." Herbert let the word hang there, heavy with unspoken meaning. After the meeting, Christina touched his arm. "Darling, I'll meet you at the foundation dinner. James mentioned some concerns about the Asian market that I'd like to discuss first." "Of course." Herbert kissed her cheek, catching the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. "Don't be too late. You know how Philip values punctuality." He worked later than usual that Thursday, reviewing files with methodical precision. At 8:45 p.m., Candace burst into his office without knocking. "Sir, you can't, the cleaning crew needs access. And the ventilation system." Herbert rose slowly. "Move aside, Candace. Please, Mr. Gregory. Just go home. Please." He caught the desperation in her voice, the genuine fear. Not for him, he realized. For herself. "Consider this your only chance at redemption," he said quietly. "What you do in the next minute determines your future at this company." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped aside. Herbert strode past her, following the sound of muffled laughter to his private office. He paused at the door, hand on the handle, gathering his considerable self-control. The scene inside confirmed every suspicion. Christina straddled James in Herbert's executive chair, her designer dress hiked up indecently. Files lay scattered across the desk, sensitive documents that had no business being exposed. "Well?" Herbert's voice cut through their startled gasps. "This explains the irregular contract processing." James recovered first, his face twisting into a sneer. "Your wife's been earning your promotions for years, Gregory. Better keep quiet if you want to keep this cushy job. Who'd believe you over 2 witnesses anyway?" Christina's laugh held years of hidden contempt. "The kid's private school? All thanks to my extra hours. You're such a loser. James is twice the man you'll ever be." Herbert's smile, cold, confident, predatory, stopped their gloating cold. He reached past them to his desk, pressing a single button with deliberate precision. "Too late," he said softly. "The company owner just saw everything. Now whose job is at risk?" The blood drained from James's face as he realized the boardroom's live stream had been activated. Christina scrambled off his lap, stumbling in her haste. "Herbert, baby, we can explain," she began. "Save it for the lawyers, Christina." Herbert straightened his tie, his composure magnificent in its totality. "I believe you'll find your access cards have already been deactivated. Security will escort you out." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Herbert noted with satisfaction that Philip had chosen his largest personnel for the task. "Mr. Delgado, Mrs. Gregory," one guard announced. "Please come with us." James stood, attempting to salvage some dignity. "This isn't over, Herbert." "Oh, but it is." Herbert settled into his chair, after wiping it thoroughly with his pocket square. "You see, Philip Summers doesn't appreciate people manipulating his company. Or his chosen successor." Christina froze halfway to the door. "Successor? Did James not mention that part? Philip's been grooming me for CEO. Not that you'll be around to enjoy the perks." Herbert turned to his computer, dismissing them. "Candace, please come in here. We have some paperwork to process." The secretary slipped past the disgraced couple, clutching a folder to her chest. In the doorway, Christina turned back one last time. "The children," she started, "will learn a valuable lesson about integrity." Herbert cut her off. "Goodbye, Christina. Do remember to return your company car. The one you used to drive to your networking meetings." The security guards led them away, their footsteps fading down the marble hallway. Herbert watched their reflection disappear in the window, Manhattan's lights twinkling behind him like witnesses to his triumph. "Sir?" Candace's voice quavered. "I'm so sorry. They blackmailed me. James threatened my job, my reputation." "I know." Herbert's tone softened slightly. "That's why you're still here. But Candace? Never lie to me again." She nodded frantically. "Never, Mr. Gregory. I swear." "Good. Now, let's begin the termination paperwork. I believe we have quite a bit of cleaning up to do." As Candace pulled up the necessary forms, Herbert's phone buzzed with a message from Philip. "Well handled. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring a list of James's contracts for review." Herbert allowed himself a small smile as he typed his response. The game wasn't over. It was merely entering a new phase. And Herbert Gregory had always been very, very good at games. Outside his office, Manhattan's corporate warriors continued their endless dance of ambition and betrayal. But tonight, a new player had emerged victorious. Not through manipulation or deceit, but through patience, intelligence, and the perfect poker face. The night janitor, passing by with his cart, heard something unusual from the corner office. Laughter. Low, controlled, and just a touch triumphant. Dawn hadn't yet broken over Manhattan when Philip Summers convened the emergency board meeting. Herbert sat at his right hand, expression carved from granite as security footage played on the boardroom's massive screen. The night cleaning crew had barely finished wiping down the executive floor, yet Maxwell Industries' highest echelons were already assembling for what would become known as the Thursday Morning Massacre. "I apologize for the early hour," Philip addressed the bleary-eyed board members. But this couldn't wait. He nodded to his head of security, who distributed thick folders marked confidential to each attendee. The footage showed James and Christina in various compromising positions throughout the building over months. More damning were the recorded conversations about contract manipulation, kickbacks, and their planned embezzlement scheme. "Jesus Christ," muttered the CFO, flipping through financial records. "They've been cooking the books for years." James's corporate allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, distancing themselves physically and metaphorically from the empty chair where their ringleader usually sat. Herbert noticed several of them wouldn't meet his eyes. "This stops now," Philip's voice cut through the murmurs. "Mr. Delgado and Mrs. Gregory have been escorted from the premises. Their electronic access is revoked. Their offices are being swept for evidence as we speak." One board member, Thomas Chun, raised his hand. "What about Herbert's promotions? If they were influenced, already reviewed." Philip gestured to the financial analyst standing by. Ms. Rodriguez, please share your findings. The analyst stepped forward, professional and precise. Mr. Gregory's performance metrics consistently exceeded expectations. The data shows he would have earned each promotion regardless of any external influence. In fact, evidence suggests attempts were made to delay his advancement to protect Mr. Delgado's position. Herbert maintained his composure, but satisfaction coursed through him. Years of late nights, strategic planning, and relentless dedication had built his success. Christina and James's pathetic scheme had only made his path more difficult. Given these findings, Philip continued, and the obvious leadership vacuum this creates, I'm naming Herbert Gregory CEO of Maxwell Industries, effective immediately. The announcement sparked a mix of reactions, genuine congratulations from some, forced smiles from others. Herbert accepted each with equal grace, already marking who would need watching in the coming months. After the meeting, Philip held Herbert back. There's more. My investigation uncovered something personal you should see. In Philip's private office, they reviewed additional footage. Christina, lounging in James's lap in his office after hours, laughing as they discussed their plans. Poor Herbert, she cooed, running her fingers through James's hair. So focused on his precious metrics. He actually thinks he earned those promotions. James nuzzled her neck. We'll let him keep believing that. Until we're ready to take everything. The kids' trust funds? All part of the plan, baby. We'll drain them dry. Blame Daddy's mismanagement. They'll hate him forever. Herbert's knuckles whitened on his armrest, but his voice remained steady. How long have you been collecting this? 6 months, Philip replied. Started when I noticed irregularities in James's division. Christina was an unexpected bonus. I'm sorry, Herbert. Don't be. You've given me everything I need. Meanwhile, across town, Christina swept into her favorite salon, ready to spin the story her way. She'd barely settled into her chair when her phone exploded with notifications. Her country club membership, suspended. Credit cards, frozen. Social media, flooded with screenshots from the security footage. Mrs. Gregory? The salon owner approached nervously. I'm sorry, but we can't accept your usual house charge anymore. Christina's face flushed as other patrons stared. I'll use my credit card. They're all declining. She fled the salon, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. Her phone rang. James. Baby, don't panic, he started. Don't panic? Everything's frozen. What's happening? Minor setback. My lawyers are working on it. Meet me at Mr. Delgado? A new voice interrupted. This is Detective Morrison, NYPD Financial Crimes. Please hold while we execute our search warrant. The line went dead. Christina stood on the sidewalk, her world imploding in real time. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Herbert. The children have seen everything. Your video messages to James were particularly enlightening. Don't bother coming home. At their private school, Amy and Lucas sat in the headmaster's office, watching their mother's true nature revealed on a laptop screen. Dr. Harrison, the headmaster, looked more disappointed than shocked. Your father has arranged for you to stay in school, she assured them. The board of trustees was quite impressed with his handling of the situation. Lucas, his father's analytical mind evident, asked the practical questions. Are trust funds safe? Dr. Harrison confirmed. They're tied to your father's legitimate earnings. Your mother never had access. Amy wiped tears from her eyes, but her voice was steel. Good. I don't want anything from her. Across the city, James's carefully constructed world crumbled. His corporate allies evaporated. Years of mutual back-scratching forgotten in the face of potential criminal charges. His attempt to access offshore accounts failed. Philip's team had already frozen them. Your previous employers send their regards, Herbert informed him via conference call. They're very interested in reviewing your tenure with them. Especially Norton Corporation, remember them? James's face went ashen. The Norton Corp scandal had been buried years ago, or so he'd thought. You can't prove anything, he blustered. Check your email, James. Your old assistant there was very helpful. Apparently, you had a similar arrangement with the CEO's wife. In the background, James heard Christina screaming as she discovered his other networking partnerships. Her threats of revenge brought a rare smile to Herbert's face. Candace, meanwhile, sat trembling in a conference room with corporate security. They blackmailed me, she explained, handing over printed emails. James threatened to expose my brother's addiction issues. Said he'd make sure he never got treatment. The head of security reviewed the evidence. These timestamps match our investigation timeline. Why come forward now? Because Mr. Gregory showed mercy when he could have destroyed me. I won't waste that chance. Herbert's new CEO office buzzed with activity. Teams of auditors combed through records. Security experts swept for additional surveillance devices, and lawyers prepared documents for multiple cases. Sir? His new secretary, thoroughly vetted, appeared at the door. Your children are here. Amy and Lucas entered, both looking older than their years. Herbert stood, uncertain for the first time that day. Lucas spoke first. Dad, we saw the videos. All of them. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't be... Amy interrupted. We needed to know the truth. About Mom, about everything. Herbert studied their faces, his daughter's quiet strength, his son's analytical gaze. What do you need from me? Just you, Dad. Lucas stepped forward. The real you. No more pretending everything's perfect. Amy joined her brother. And maybe some self-defense classes. The other kids at school are getting weird. Herbert laughed, genuine warmth breaking through his corporate armor. Done. Anything else? Pizza? They asked in unison. Pizza, he agreed. But first, I need to finish something. After they left, Herbert reviewed the final piece of evidence Philip had provided. Footage of Christina coaching James on how to manipulate corporate contracts. Send it to the SEC, he instructed his legal team. All of it. As evening settled over Manhattan, Herbert stood at his office window. Below, protesters gathered, shareholders demanding blood, reporters seeking stories, and among them, he spotted Christina trying to get past security. His phone buzzed. Another desperate message from James, offering to explain everything. Herbert deleted it without reading further. His new office, 10 floors above his old one, offered a perfect view of his domain. Not bad for a loser. Mr. Gregory? His secretary's voice came through the intercom. The FBI is here for their appointment. Herbert straightened his tie, a predator's smile playing at his lips. Send them in. And Sarah? Order dinner. This might take a while. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of victory. In his reflection, Herbert saw what Christina and James never had. A man who'd built his success on steel and strategy, not seduction and schemes. Their betrayal hadn't weakened him. It had simply revealed his true strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, restructuring divisions, reassuring investors, rebuilding trust. But tonight, Herbert Gregory would savor the sweetest success of all, the complete and utter destruction of those who'd underestimated him. In the lobby, Christina made one last attempt to reach him. Please, I can explain everything. Security guided her out as Herbert's response came via text. Save it for your deposition. The media dubbed it the Maxwell meltdown, but Herbert preferred Philip's term. Corporate Darwinism. In the end, it wasn't the strongest who survived, but the most honest. Who knew integrity could be such a powerful weapon? As the city lights blinked on, Herbert reviewed tomorrow's agenda. Board restructuring, SEC meetings, family dinner with the kids. A full day, but he wouldn't have it any other way. After all, empires weren't built by taking days off. His phone buzzed one final time. Philip. Well done, son. Ready for day 2? Herbert's reply was simple. Born ready. Let them call it a scandal. He called it justice. And justice, served cold in a corner office with a view, tasted absolutely perfect. The Securities and Exchange Commission has launched a formal investigation into Maxwell Industries. The CNBC anchor's voice filled Herbert Gregory's office as he reviewed the latest forensic accounting reports. His signature appeared decisive and sharp on each document, authorizing full cooperation with federal authorities. Turn it up, he instructed his assistant as the story continued. Sources confirmed that former Vice President James Delgado's alleged fraud extends beyond Maxwell Industries. Multiple companies report similar schemes dating back nearly 2 decades. Herbert's phone buzzed, a text from the SEC's lead investigator. You were right about Norton Corporation. The pattern matches exactly. The investigation had taken on a life of its own. What began as an internal corporate matter had exploded into one of Wall Street's most shocking scandals. Herbert's methodical exposure of James's past had revealed a pattern so extensive it triggered investigations at 5 major corporations. Special Agent Sarah Martinez strode into his office, tablet in hand. Mr. Gregory, we've mapped Mr. Delgado's complete network. Your wife's involvement proved crucial. She kept detailed records. Of course she did, Herbert replied, unsurprised. Christina never could resist insurance policies. The agent swiped through documents on her tablet. She recorded everything. Every deal. Every encounter. But here's where it gets interesting. She also recorded other executives' wives involved in similar arrangements. The private school mothers, Herbert concluded. The agent nodded. Your wife's social climbing had an unexpected benefit. She collected dirt on everyone she met. Apparently, James's scheme was larger than even he knew. She was building her own leverage. A knock interrupted them. Philip Summers entered, looking grimmer than usual. James is making a run for it. Private jet filed a flight plan to Venezuela. Herbert's smile was cold. Let him try. Across town, James Delgado hurried across the private airfield, carry-on clutched tight. The sleek Gulfstream waited, engines humming. He'd liquidated what accounts he could still access, enough for a comfortable life somewhere without extradition. Welcome aboard, Mr. Delgado. The pilot greeted him. Weather looks clear to Caracas. James settled into the leather seat, accepting a glass of champagne. Take off as soon as possible. The jet taxied, lifted off, and landed 2 hours later at JFK International, surrounded by federal agents. The pilot, James demanded as they led him away in handcuffs, has been on Mr. Summers' payroll longer than you have, an agent informed him cheerfully. Nice try, though. Christina's downfall proved equally spectacular. Her attempt to leverage her recordings of other school mothers backfired catastrophically. Instead of buying silence, it bought her complete social excommunication. Did you really think we wouldn't compare notes? Miranda Chen, the board chairman's wife, confronted her at her last school fundraiser appearance. We've all received your little blackmail hints. Well, guess what? We chose honesty. Christina looked around the room, seeing only hostile faces. These women, once her social circle, now formed a wall of contempt. Our husbands have all disclosed everything, Miranda continued. The school board knows. The companies know. Your leverage is gone. You'll all go down with me, Christina threatened. No, we won't. Because unlike you, we're actually sorry. We've made amends. You? You're still trying to profit from it. Later that week, Christina stood outside the massive iron gates of her former home, pressing the intercom repeatedly. Herbert, we need to talk about the children. His voice came through, cool and professional. Any communication needs to go through my lawyers. Think of the children, she pleaded, voice breaking. They need their mother. They needed a mother 16 years ago. What they got was a sociopath who mocked their father and planned to steal their trust funds. Goodbye, Christina. The gates remained closed. Through them, she watched Amy and Lucas exit the house, heading to their father's waiting car. Neither looked in her direction. Inside his home office that evening, Herbert reviewed a different kind of document, Amy's college application essay. The title caught his attention. Integrity in the Face of Betrayal. Is it too personal? Amy asked from the doorway. Princeton's my dream school, but if you think it's too much. Herbert read the opening paragraph, pride swelling. His daughter had transformed their family crisis into a powerful meditation on ethics and resilience. It's perfect, he assured her. Raw, honest, and strong. Just like you. Lucas appeared behind his sister, tablet in hand. Dad, the TEDx organizers confirmed my slot. Surviving Family Betrayal, a Teenager's Guide to Moral Courage. Herbert studied his children. Amy's quiet strength, Lucas's analytical mind. They'd emerged from the crisis not as victims, but as advocates for integrity. Months later, Herbert stood at the podium accepting the CEO of the Year award. The audience included his children, Philip, and faces from every phase of his career. Success built on lies falls under its own weight. He began his speech. Success built on truth rises above all betrayal. I learned this lesson the hard way, but it was worth every moment. In the maximum security wing of a federal prison, James Delgado opened his mail to find photos of the ceremony. Herbert's success splashed across business magazines. The children's achievements highlighted in social pages. His empire, built on quicksand, had collapsed. Herbert's, built on bedrock, soared. James picked up a pen, beginning another letter begging forgiveness. Like the others, it would go unanswered. Christina folded clothes at her retail job, watching her former friends shop without acknowledging her. Through the store window, she could see Maxwell Industries' tower dominating the skyline. Somewhere up there, Herbert was thriving without her. Her manager approached. "Stockroom needs organizing." "That's your job now." She nodded, adding it to her list of menial tasks. Her divorce settlement had barely covered her legal fees. The prenup, ironically insisted upon by her own parents, had proven airtight. In a smaller but respectable firm across town, Candace completed her immunity-granted testimony. Her new job wasn't as prestigious as Maxwell Industries, but it came with something better: peace of mind. She sealed an envelope containing her annual thank-you note to Herbert. His mercy had given her a second chance, one she'd earned through honesty. Herbert's new corner office, 10 floors above his old one, offered a perfect view of his domain. Maxwell Industries had doubled in value under his leadership. New ethics policies made it a model of corporate governance. Philip had granted him equity partnership, making official what everyone already knew. Herbert Gregory represented the company's future. On his desk, next to family photos and industry awards, sat a simple frame. Inside, the security footage still, Christina sneering, "You're such a loser." Below it, his CEO of the Year award inscription, "To those who choose integrity over easy success." The same footage now opened every corporate ethics training session. New employees watched the scene unfold, learning that integrity wasn't just a buzzword at Maxwell Industries. It was the foundation of their success. Amy's acceptance letter from Princeton hung beside Lucas's viral TEDx talk statistics. His children had transformed trauma into triumph, their story inspiring others to choose truth over convenience. Herbert's phone buzzed. A message from Philip. "Dinner tonight? Might be time to discuss your chairman transition." He smiled, typing his response. The view from his office showed Manhattan spread before him, but his real achievement sat in that simple frame. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is living well. And living well, he discovered, meant living true. In the end, Christina had been right about one thing. James was twice the man Herbert would ever be. Twice as corrupt, twice as weak, twice as deserving of his fall. Herbert Gregory had built his empire on steel and stone, not sand and schemes. Let the world call it a scandal. He called it justice. And justice, served from a corner office with a view, had never tasted sweeter. 5 years later, the price of betrayal. The fluorescent lights of Macy's Herald Square buzzed overhead as Christina Gregory, now Christina Martinez after her second failed marriage, folded another stack of designer clothes she once would have bought without a second thought. At 47, her carefully maintained appearance couldn't quite hide the bitterness etched around her mouth or the desperate gleam in her eyes. "Martinez." Customer complaint in fitting room 3, her 20-something supervisor called out, barely concealing her satisfaction at ordering around a woman who had once hosted galas in Manhattan penthouses. Christina hurried to the fitting room, only to freeze at the sight of Miranda Chen trying on a Versace dress. The board chairman's wife, still a fixture in the social circles Christina had been exiled from, didn't bother hiding her smirk. "Oh, how fitting," Miranda commented, adjusting the designer dress. "Could you fetch this in a size smaller? The holiday collection is divine this year." "Not that you'd know." Working in the regular section, Christina swallowed her retort, remembering her last warning about being rude to customers. Her retail salary barely covered the rent on her Queens studio apartment. She couldn't afford another incident. "Right away, ma'am," she managed, ducking out to the stockroom. Through the store's windows, Maxwell Industries Tower dominated the skyline, a daily reminder of everything she'd lost. Her phone buzzed, another rejection from a headhunter. Given your history with Maxwell Industries, we don't feel you'd be a good fit. They never said it directly, but her name had become toxic in corporate circles. The scandal had its own Wikipedia page now. Across town, in a maximum security federal prison, James Delgado stared at the latest newspaper article about Maxwell Industries' unprecedented growth. His prison-issued reading glasses couldn't quite focus on the smaller text, but Herbert Gregory's photo was sharp enough, accepting some international business award, looking even more distinguished with silver temples. "Still obsessing over your old company, Delgado?" his cellmate asked. "That's what, 15 years left on your sentence." 12 with good behavior, James corrected automatically, though they both knew white-collar criminals rarely served full terms. Still, the SEC had made an example of him. His pattern of corporate fraud, spanning decades and multiple companies, had become a cautionary tale taught in business schools. His last appeal had been denied 6 months ago. The evidence had been overwhelming: Christina's detailed records, Candace's testimony, the paper trail at Norton Corporation. His corporate allies had turned state's evidence, each racing to save themselves. His prison account held exactly $127.43. The government had seized everything else: houses, cars, investments. Even his designer suits had been auctioned off to pay restitution. The cheap prison uniform chafed both his skin and his ego. A guard appeared with mail call. "Delgado, another return to sender. Gregory's office still won't accept your letters." James crumpled his latest attempt at apologizing. Or more accurately, attempting to manipulate his way back into some position of influence. Herbert's response never varied. All communication must go through lawyers. Meanwhile, in Princeton's prestigious Gothic halls, Amy Gregory's thesis on corporate ethics was creating waves. At 21, she'd already been featured in business journals, her unique perspective on corporate culture shaped by personal experience. "Your case study on Maxwell Industries' transformation is exceptional," her advisor praised. "The comparison between fear-based compliance and integrity-driven ethics is particularly insightful." Amy smiled, adjusting her laptop to show her latest research. "I've been interviewing executives who lived through the transition. The cultural shift after my father implemented the new policies was apparently remarkable." Her phone lit up with a text from Lucas, now a freshman at Harvard. "Guess who asked me to give another TED Talk? This time they want both of us. Surviving Betrayal: A Family's Journey to Truth." Lucas's first TEDx talk had gone viral, spawning a youth movement focused on moral courage and family resilience. At 19, he'd already published a book aimed at helping teenagers navigate family crises. The advance had gone to a foundation supporting children of families broken by corporate fraud. Their mother's occasional attempts at contact, usually around holidays or their birthdays, went unanswered. Her social media stalking had revealed her children's successes, but she remained blocked from directly reaching them. Her last Christmas card had been returned unopened, her tearful voicemail deleted unheard. Across the city, Candace Wilson, N.E. Matthews, reviewed quarterly reports in her new office. The smaller firm she joined after her immunity deal had promoted her to chief of staff, appreciating both her experience and her hard-learned lessons about integrity. She sealed her annual thank you note to Herbert, 5 years of gratitude for the mercy that had given her a second chance. Her testimony had helped build the federal case against James and Christina, while her documented blackmail experience had shaped Maxwell Industries' new whistleblower protection policies. Her brother, whose addiction James had threatened to expose, now ran a successful recovery program. Herbert's quiet assistance with treatment costs had saved not just her career, but her family. In Maxwell Industries' executive floor, now 20 stories higher than his original office, Herbert Gregory reviewed the latest expansion plans. At 50, he'd fully grown into his power, his reputation for ethical leadership making him one of Wall Street's most respected figures. Philip Summers, though officially retired, still kept an office down the hall. Their mentor-proc relationship had evolved into a deep friendship, their shared vision of corporate integrity reshaping industry standards. The Harvard Business Review wants to do another piece, Herbert's assistant mentioned. They're calling Maxwell's transformation a template for ethical corporate reform. Herbert nodded, glancing at the framed security footage still on his wall. Christina's sneer forever captured in mid-insult. The frame's inscription had become the company's unofficial motto. Success built on lies falls under its own weight. Success built on truth rises above all betrayal. The scandal had sparked a revolution in corporate governance. Maxwell's ethics training program, built around the security footage and subsequent investigation, was now licensed to corporations worldwide. Business schools used the case study to teach crisis management and ethical leadership. Herbert's phone buzzed, a message from Amy. "Dad, Lucas and I want to contribute a chapter to your book. Our perspective on how ethical leadership starts at home." His children had emerged from the crisis stronger, their understanding of integrity shaped by watching him choose truth over convenience, justice over revenge. Their success, Amy's academic achievements, Lucas's advocacy work, meant more than any corporate victory. A calendar alert reminded him of tomorrow's board meeting. Maxwell's value had tripled under his leadership, but more importantly, its culture had been transformed. The fear-based hierarchy James had built had been replaced by transparent processes and clear accountability. Christina's last desperate attempt at contact had come 6 months ago, a tear-stained letter begging for help finding a better job. Her third engagement had fallen through when the wealthy widower's family had Googled her name. Her retail position remained her only option, her reputation permanently stained by her own choices. James's prison writings, smuggled out and posted online by a sympathetic guard, revealed a man still attempting to justify his actions. His claims of being misunderstood and unfairly persecuted only reinforced the justice of his downfall. The private school mothers who'd once followed Christina's lead had rebuilt their lives through honesty. Miranda Chun now led ethics seminars for corporate spouses, turning her experience into a cautionary tale about moral compromise. Herbert's new wife, a brilliant federal prosecutor he'd met during the SEC investigation, shared his commitment to integrity. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and shared values, stood in sharp contrast to his sham of a first marriage. The annual Maxwell Industries Charity Gala, once Christina's social playground, now focused on supporting whistleblower protection and corporate ethics initiatives. The guest list notably excluded anyone involved in the scandal, their absence a reminder that social consequences outlasted legal ones. Looking out over Manhattan's skyline, Herbert reflected on the 5 years since the scandal. His empire had risen from the ashes of betrayal, stronger for having been tested. The price of truth had been high, but the rewards proved immeasurable. In Queens, Christina finished her shift, walking past Maxwell's illuminated tower on her way to the subway. In prison, James stared at his ceiling, counting days until a parole hearing that would likely deny him again. Their betrayal had cost them everything: wealth, status, family, freedom. But in his corner office, Herbert Gregory smiled at his children's latest achievements, his company's continued growth, his life's complete vindication. The security footage still played at every new employee orientation. Christina's words now a punchline: "You're such a loser." Time had revealed the true losers in this game of corporate chess. Success built on lies had indeed fallen under its own weight. Success built on truth had risen above all betrayal. And in Manhattan's glittering canyons of power, that truth still echoed. Integrity, once proven, outweighed all the schemes of lesser players. The price of betrayal proved steeper than any of them had imagined. The rewards of integrity proved greater than anyone had dreamed. And Herbert Gregory, once mocked as a loser, had won the only game that truly mattered, the one played for keeps.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today, new narrative story. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, I discovered my wife in the arms of another man, our neighbor. This is the story of how I took back my dignity and found a path to healing. In a picturesque village nestled among the Swiss Alps, David and Clara Miller appeared to embody the ideal couple. David, 35, was a dedicated architect with aspirations to establish a prominent practice. Clara, 33, was a beloved teacher, known for her kindness and community involvement. Their life together seemed flawless, filled with shared dreams of travel and family. However, the cracks in their seemingly perfect relationship began to show, ultimately leading to a betrayal that would change their lives forever. As their 5th wedding anniversary approached, David planned an elaborate surprise. He envisioned a romantic dinner at their favorite restaurant, followed by a weekend getaway to the serene mountains. Little did he know, the day would unravel into a heart-wrenching confrontation. David was a man who poured his heart into his work. Growing up in a family of builders, he developed a passion for design and construction early on. His dedication often kept him late at the office, but he always made time for Clara, believing that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. Clara, on the other hand, had an infectious spirit. As a teacher, she was adored by her students and respected by parents. Her weekends were often filled with volunteering at local charities, organizing community events, and hosting friends for dinner. However, her social nature began to shift when she formed a close friendship with Matthias, their neighbor. Matthias, 34, was charming and charismatic, with a passion for gardening and an easy smile. He and Clara often bonded over their shared interests, which David initially found endearing. As weeks turned into months, David noticed a subtle change in Clara. Her laughter seemed more vibrant when she spoke of Matthias, and their conversations occasionally extended late into the night. But David chose to trust her, believing in the strength of their marriage. On the morning of their anniversary, David woke up early, bubbling with excitement. He had decorated the house with flowers and lit candles, creating an inviting atmosphere. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air as he prepared a delicious breakfast. He envisioned Clara's delighted expression when she walked into the dining room. As Clara entered, her face lit up with surprise and joy. "David, this is beautiful. You didn't have to go to all this trouble," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. "I wanted today to be special," David replied, his heart swelling with love. They spent the morning reminiscing about their favorite memories together, laughter echoing through their home. Clara's smile, however, held a hint of distraction, something David brushed aside. After breakfast, David handed Clara a small gift, a delicate silver locket engraved with their initials. Her eyes sparkled as she opened it, and she hugged him tightly. They decided to spend the afternoon together, planning their getaway. Yet, as the hours ticked by, David noticed Clara frequently checking her phone, her expressions ranging from excitement to anxiety. "What's going on?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. "Just some planning for the weekend. You know how it is," Clara replied, brushing off his inquiry. David wanted to believe her, but felt a nagging doubt gnawing at him. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the village, David suggested they get ready for their dinner reservation. Clara smiled, but there was something in her eyes that unsettled him. "I'll be ready in a bit. Just need to freshen up," she said, heading to the bedroom. Feeling a mix of anticipation and unease, David decided to check on Clara. He knocked lightly on the bedroom door but received no response. An uncomfortable feeling settled in his stomach. He turned the knob and stepped inside, expecting to find her applying makeup or choosing an outfit. Instead, the sight that greeted him shattered his world. Clara was entwined with Matthias, laughter ringing through the air like a cruel mockery of their vows. Time stood still as David's heart plummeted. Clara's eyes widened in horror as she spotted him, while Matthias scrambled to cover himself, the sheets tangling around them like a noose. "David, I can explain!" Clara gasped, desperation lacing her voice. "No need," he replied, voice cold and steady, though inside he was a storm of emotion. "I know exactly what's happening here." David's heart raced as rage and betrayal surged through him, the weight of their broken trust pressing down like an anvil. He turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. In the aftermath, David F.E.4 found himself walking aimlessly through the village, his mind racing. The pain was excruciating, an ache that felt physical. He couldn't process what had just happened. Betrayal had never felt this visceral. Clara's pleas echoed in his mind, but he refused to entertain any justification for her actions. As night fell, he returned home, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words and shattered dreams. David needed to confront Clara, but not just about the affair. He needed to reclaim his dignity. He texted Matthias, requesting a meeting the following day. In the dim light of their kitchen, Clara awaited him, her expression a mix of guilt and anger. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she cried. "We were just—" "Stop!" David interrupted, the pain in his voice sharper than he intended. "You've betrayed me in the most profound way. I deserve honesty, not this. I'm meeting Matthias tomorrow." "What do you plan to do?" Clara's voice was laced with fear. "I'm not here to discuss it with you. I'll get my answers from him." The next day, David met Matthias at a small cafe. Matthias, appearing confident, took a seat, his demeanor relaxed, as if they were discussing a casual topic rather than an affair that had shattered David's life. "David, I'm glad we could talk," Matthias said, trying to project calm. "Let's cut the pleasantries," David replied, his voice firm. "I want to know why you thought it was okay to betray my trust." Matthias smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Clara and I have a connection you wouldn't understand. You've been so focused on your work. She was seeking something more fulfilling." David's blood boiled. "Fulfilling? You think betraying your neighbor is fulfilling? You took advantage of my trust and her vulnerability." The conversation escalated, with David confronting Matthias about the lies he had told Clara, painting a picture of a romance that was anything but. As they spoke, David's mind raced, formulating a plan. He needed to contact the other betrayed spouse, OBS, Lena, Matthias's long-term girlfriend who was oblivious to the affair. That evening, David crafted a message for Lena. He approached it delicately, knowing that she would be devastated. "Hi, Lena. I hope this message finds you well. I need to speak with you about something important regarding Matthias and Clara. Please call me when you can." Within a few hours, his phone buzzed with Lena's name. Her voice trembled as she answered. "David? What's going on? I believe you deserve to know the truth. Matthias has been involved with my wife, Clara, for some time now. I'm sorry to bring this to you, but it's important." Silence filled the line before Lena's sharp intake of breath pierced through. "Are you serious? I can't believe this. I can share more if you'd like to meet. I think we both need answers." They arranged to meet at the same cafe David had confronted Matthias. The weight of the situation hung heavily over them as they sat across from each other, exchanging stories of betrayal. Lena's heartache mirrored David's, and together they forged an unexpected bond. With Lena's support, David decided to confront Clara and Matthias together. They agreed to meet at the park where Clara and Matthias often spent time, a serene location now stained with the bitterness of betrayal. On the designated day, David felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He and Lena arrived first, seated on a bench, watching as Clara and Matthias approached hand in hand, laughter spilling from their lips. The sight was almost too much to bear. As they neared, David stood up, heart pounding. "Clara, Matthias, we need to talk." Confusion washed over their faces as they realized the gravity of the situation. Clara's smile faded, replaced by a look of horror when she saw Lena beside David. "David? What's happening?" Clara's voice quivered, betraying her panic. Surprise, Lena said, her tone sharp. Your betrayal was more public than you thought. Clara's face turned pale as she registered the implications. What do you mean? David stepped forward, a mix of anger and hurt fueling his voice. Clara, you don't get to pretend anymore. I know about your affair with Matthias, and I've spoken with Lena. She deserves to know the truth. The confrontation erupted into chaos, with Clara's desperate attempts to explain falling flat against the weight of their betrayal. Matthias tried to downplay the situation, but the gravity of their actions was undeniable. David and Lena stood firm, united in their pain. As the confrontation unfolded, Clara's facade crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded for forgiveness. I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you, David. But you did, David replied, voice steady. You chose to betray me with someone I trusted. How can I ever trust you again? Lena added, You need to understand the impact of your choices, Clara. You took advantage of both of us. In that moment, Clara realized the depth of her betrayal, the consequences echoing far beyond their private lives. As Matthias attempted to defend his actions, David saw the truth. Their relationship was built on deceit and betrayal. The confrontation reached a boiling point, and Clara's sobs filled the air, her regret palpable. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. David felt a pang of sorrow for the woman he had loved, but it was overshadowed by the anger that had taken root in his heart. It doesn't matter anymore, Clara. This is over. In the days following the confrontation, David grappled with his emotions. The pain of betrayal lingered, but so did a sense of liberation. He had faced the truth head-on, reclaiming his dignity in the process. Lena became a source of support, and their friendship blossomed into something deeper. They spent evenings discussing their dreams, their lives intertwined by shared experiences. David found solace in Lena's understanding, her compassion offering a balm for his wounded heart. As time passed, David focused on his work, pouring his energy into his architecture projects. Each design became a reflection of his journey, building from the ruins of betrayal into something beautiful. Lena encouraged him to explore his creativity, and together they visited art exhibits and engaged in discussions about their futures. Slowly, David's heart began to heal, the pain transforming into a drive to create a fulfilling life. Months later, David received a message from Clara requesting to meet. The thought filled him with anxiety, but he agreed, wanting closure. They met at a quiet cafe, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. Thank you for meeting me, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think I'd hear from you again, David replied, keeping his tone neutral. I've had time to reflect on everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to cause you pain, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. David felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and even sympathy. Clara, what we had is over. I'm moving on. I understand, she said, nodding slowly. I just wanted you to know that I've been working on myself. I'm trying to become a better person. Good. You need to, David replied. But I can't be part of your journey anymore. As they parted ways, David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced Clara, confronted the pain, and emerged stronger. David's journey through betrayal transformed him. He learned that love requires trust, and when that trust is broken, rebuilding is essential, not just for the relationship, but for oneself. Clara and Matthias became lessons in his past, reminders of the importance of honesty and respect. With Lena by his side, David began to embrace the future with hope. Their bond deepened, filled with shared experiences and mutual understanding. David had learned to trust again, and for the first time in a long time, he felt free. In the end, this story serves as a powerful reminder. Even in the depths of betrayal, one can find the strength to rise, rebuild, and forge a path towards healing and love. Thank you for watching this tale of love, betrayal, and resilience. What would you have done in David's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share this story with others.
Life doesn't always go the way we expect. I spent nearly 30 years climbing the corporate ladder in middle management, feeling secure in my career. But the economy proved far more unpredictable than I could have imagined. The downturn came quickly, and soon the company that seemed so stable was shrinking rapidly. I could see what was coming, but I felt powerless to stop it. As my career unraveled, I tried to keep things steady at home. I didn't want to burden my second wife, Kathy, with my troubles, especially since her real estate business was also suffering. She was barely scraping by, closing only a few sales here and there. Both of us were struggling in our separate worlds, not fully aware of the personal storms we were each dealing with. At 50, I found myself back in school, a path I never expected to take. After nearly 3 decades with the same company, I was blindsided by the sudden layoffs. The severance I received wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Our house and cars were paid off, so we weren't in terrible shape financially, but it still felt like a huge shift in my life. Kathy was also struggling, but she stayed hopeful. "Things are getting better," she'd say after finally landing a few showings. One day I decided to surprise her with lunch. I checked her first appointment, but didn't find her there. I eventually spotted her car at her most expensive listing, a huge estate that could have brought in a big commission. When I walked in quietly, I didn't want to disturb her with a client. But then I found her in the kitchen with a man. He had his pants down and she was on her knees. They were laughing and he was making crude comments while she smiled up at him. I stood frozen for a moment, then pulled out my phone and started recording. Once I had enough, I couldn't hold back my anger. I confronted the man, firmly grabbing his collar, but quickly realized that aggression was not the answer and chose to walk away. Kathy, shocked, ran out, leaving her blouse open behind her. The man was still moaning on the ground when I took his wallet, got his name, and told him I'd see him in court. He begged me not to ruin his family, admitting he wasn't the first man Kathy had done this with. He gave me a friend's name to back up his story. After that, I never spoke to Kathy again, except during the divorce. She sent me a long letter of apology, claiming she had done it to save her business. I didn't bother reading past the first page before throwing it away. I tried to keep things civil during the divorce until Kathy realized I wasn't coming back. Then she turned difficult. At our meeting with her lawyer, I handed over the photos and said, "If she fights me, these go public. I've found 2 more men she's used her sales techniques on. This is still an alienation of affection state, and the lawsuits from their wives could ruin her. She'll likely lose her real estate license, and even if she keeps it, no one around here will hire her." I gave them an ultimatum. This deal isn't bad, and it's her only shot. I want a decision by the end of the day. Her lawyer called just before the deadline. She had no choice but to agree. I wouldn't live in the house again, so she had to buy me out or sell it. She was furious when I told her she couldn't be the one to sell it. To raise the money, she had to sell her sailboat and Mustang. Rumors spread despite my efforts to keep things quiet, and she started having trouble getting listings. Once the divorce was final, I moved away. I found a great deal on a foreclosure, thanks to what I'd learned from Kathy. It was a 3-bedroom house on 9 acres with a barn and outbuildings. Way more than I needed, but I figured I could sell it for a profit later. When I met with an employment counselor, they laid out the harsh reality. The job market here is even tougher, and not having a degree is holding you back. You should consider going back to school. You only need about 1.5 years to finish your degree, and we'll cover tuition and books. With nothing to lose, I enrolled in a community college that had a partnership with a university, so I could eventually get a 4-year degree. Most of the students were older, like me, trying to improve their lives. I even made some friends and started dating, sometimes women younger than my 2 sons from my first marriage. My ex-wife had cheated too, but the boys were older by then, and we still had a good relationship. In my last semester, I took a workshop on starting small businesses. The final project was to create and market a fake business. Our instructor paired us in teams with people we had little in common with, thinking it would spark creativity. My partner, Gail, was a fashion major about 20 years younger than me. She was smart, but inexperienced. I invited Gail and a few other teams over to my place for a brainstorming session. After we hit a wall with ideas, we stopped trying and started drinking. I made sure everyone had a safe spot to sleep. Gail and I ended up talking about fashion and branding. She brought up how brands like Members Only and Izod made fortunes through smart marketing, even when the products weren't that great. We joked around, looking at our friends on the couch. "What about redneck chic?" I asked. Gail laughed. "We'd have to brand it." Looking at my friend's Aeropostale sweatshirt, I said, "How about Air Raccoon?" She burst out laughing. "And jeans, lardash!" We joked back and forth until Gail headed to bed. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. That's when it hit me. We had our fake business idea. My administrative and marketing skills would pair perfectly with her fashion and production expertise. I made coffee, and Gail helped with breakfast. As everyone else slowly woke up, some ate while others just nursed their coffee and juice. I asked Gail to stay after everyone left, and I shared my idea. She grinned. I was thinking the same thing. She designed a logo of a raccoon, but something was missing. Then it came to me. Wings. It's Air Raccoon after all. She agreed and adjusted the design, and it looked much better. She also created the Lardash logo, a cheeky design shaped like two bum cheeks for the rear pocket. We now had a design, business plan, and marketing strategy. Time to move forward. Gail didn't have money, but had the talent for production. I could handle the rest. Later, I asked her, "Wouldn't it be great to have real products, not just graphics? What do we need?" She explained we'd need a professional programmable monogram machine, costing anywhere from $7,000 to $15,000 new, or less if we found a used one. "That's more than I thought," I said, "but it's doable. Gail, how about this? I'll fund the startup, you handle design and production, and I'll take care of the rest." She thought about it for just a moment and agreed. I hired a lawyer to draw up a fair deal. The company would be called Redneck Chic Clothing Company, and I'd own the trademarks for Air Raccoon, while Gail would own the Lardash trademark. Since I was funding everything, I got 65%, and Gail got 35%. She wasn't thrilled with the split, but eventually agreed, knowing I could easily replace her. We found a $12,000 machine for $4,000 from a seller desperate to unload it, and had it delivered to my garage. After some training, Gail was thrilled and got to work. We bought 6 dozen assorted t-shirts, men's in black and dark red, women's in pink, yellow, and gray, plus black and white hats. Gail programmed the machine, and soon it was running, stitching our logos in a blend of silver, white, and black threads. The wings on the raccoon had a gossamer look exactly as we envisioned. We had Alice, Jamie, and some friends model the clothes. Gail insisted on getting an overlock machine to sew prototype jeans, which wasn't as pricey as the monogrammer. We even got help from some students in the TV and radio department to make a commercial. The ad featured Alice wearing our work jeans and Air Raccoon shirt, helping Jamie on the farm. Later, she wore the dressier version with a pink shirt, confidently looking into the camera. The tagline, "Lardash jeans, definitely not for little girls." The instructor was shocked by our success, and we aced the course. More importantly, we started getting real product requests and built a strong local following. Gail and I had different ideas about the business, but we agreed on many key points. I had a 48x36 metal building on my property, so we applied for a zoning waiver as a cottage industry, got approved, and remodeled it. We added insulation, a heat pump, a 2-stall bathroom, and a break room. We installed 12 new Melcro machines and advertised for employees. We were fortunate. The area had a history of textile work, so there were many skilled sewers. We received 900 applications for just 12 positions. We tested each candidate, ensuring they could handle the machines. By the end of the week, we had 11 hires. The last hire came unexpectedly, a woman in her 60s named Mavis. She didn't apply formally, but showed up asking for a chance. She had 50 years of experience sewing everything from shirts to sails and was in desperate need of work after her husband passed. Despite not knowing the machines, she was confident she could figure it out. I gave her a shot, and she teared up with gratitude. Gail wasn't thrilled at first, but was impressed by how quickly Mavis learned. She mastered the basics in 3 hours. We paid employees minimum wage plus a production bonus if they operated the machines at 80% efficiency, averaging $9 an hour. We couldn't offer full insurance, but arranged a deal for 4 doctor visits a year for $20 and up to 3 free generic prescriptions. It wasn't much, but the workers appreciated the effort. Most of them were middle-aged, with experience in the textile industry. Mavis naturally became the floor manager, acting like a grandmother and motivator to the team. We had each employee make a shirt in all 5 colors, with their names monogrammed, which became their uniforms. They voted to work 9-hour days Monday through Thursday and 4 hours on Friday, with overtime available if needed. Birthdays were celebrated with a party, paid day off, or extra pay, and we always gave a nice gift. Mavis got a 19-inch flat screen, a Blu-ray player, and a year of Netflix as a birthday gift. She cried for an hour before heading home. Gail grumbled about the cost, as money was starting to become her focus. For a year, we kept expanding, adding a mini shift of college kids working nights and Saturdays, but still couldn't keep up. Eventually, I told Gail we needed to find a bigger facility. "How big?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement. After reviewing projections for a month, I replied, "Big enough for at least 100 machines and space for your jeans line. We might need 2 buildings." Gail was thrilled. We found a large facility and a smaller one nearby. We planned to bring in 25 machines at a time with a full setup in a year. Gail began shopping for overlock sewing machines to start the jeans production. The business had grown too big for us to handle alone. We needed managers for the plant, production, office, HR, and accounting. Our original workers were nervous about the changes, fearing the loss of the informal environment they liked. I reassured them during a meeting. "We're not moving you. Your jobs are safe. I'll still be around, and Mavis Turner will manage day-to-day operations starting Monday." Everyone cheered. Mavis was a natural leader and had already been solving many floor problems. She was hesitant at first, but accepted the role when I doubled her pay. I also gave all the original workers a bonus of 2 weeks' pay as a thank you. Gail thought I was spoiling them, but I believed in investing in loyalty. The real branding breakthrough came from Mavis. Her great-nephew, a race car driver, had just moved up to the Busch Series, the equivalent of AAA in baseball. He was one of the few black racers on the circuit. Mavis asked for a day off to see him, and I had an idea. "I'll give you the day off with pay if you bring him by for lunch. I'll treat everyone if I can have a few minutes alone with him." She was thrilled, and I saw a golden opportunity for our brand. I did some research on Mavis's nephew. He had a solid racing record and was well-liked. He was married with 1 child, and his wife was on the plus side, which aligned well with our brand. When Mavis brought him in, he was friendly, posed for photos, and made everyone laugh, gaining some loyal fans that day. Later, I got him alone in my office. "How'd you get into racing?" I asked. He explained his dad had been a mechanic who dabbled in dirt track racing. He started with go-karts at age 10 and moved on to dirt track cars by 15. Now he was set to race in the Busch Series. I was impressed. "How do you think you'll do with the right sponsorship?" "We're running on a tight budget, but I should do all right." I cut to the chase. "Let's talk business. My company's growing, but we're not there yet. Send me some numbers to get a raccoon on your car. In the meantime, how about doing some ads for us, you and your wife? We'll pay you the going rate and work sponsorship into the deal later. Think about it." I knew I was in over my head. I went to see my old professor, the one who'd helped me start this journey. He was happy to see me, and even introduced me to his class as a success story. Afterward, over coffee, I asked if he was really retiring. "Yes, after this semester," he said. I smiled. "No, you're not. You're going to be Vice President of Development at Redneck Chic Clothing." He was stunned. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. I need your connections in the academic and business world. Start building a team. We'll discuss salary later." I had already talked to Gail, and she was so focused on setting up the jeans factory, she agreed without hesitation. We also got lucky with new hires. My oldest son had just been downsized, so I hired him as our controller. He and his pregnant wife moved into a house I leased as a signing bonus. She became my personal assistant. Gail then introduced me to her aunt Amaryllis, who preferred to be called Amy. At 46, she was fit, professional, and very attractive. Without realizing it, I had hired her as our office manager. I figured even if she wasn't the best at the job, it'd be nice to have her around. Sexist, I know. Finally, my youngest son joined us as our materials manager. We didn't need a warehouse yet, but with bigger plans on the horizon, it was only a matter of time. We held a meeting with the key team: Gail, Amy, Ralph, my old professor Barry, our lawyer Greg, my son Jerry, and me. We needed to establish a chain of command to expand the company nationally. I was named CEO. Gail became VP of the jeans division. Ralph would manage the t-shirt plant. Greg and Amy would oversee the office, and Jerry would focus on streamlining materials and potential warehouse issues. Debbie, Greg's wife, would help with expansion projects. We set salaries and agreed on profit sharing, though there were no ownership options yet. Our sales were booming, and we struggled to keep up. The first 25 machines were online, and for a brief time, we were ahead of schedule. Betty, one of the original workers, was promoted to manage the new section. Barry suggested we incorporate and consider going public, but I wasn't thrilled about it, especially since we didn't manufacture our own shirts, which were foreign-made. Jerry came to me with an idea. Why not make our own shirts in the U.S.? He explained there were plenty of empty factories and skilled workers, plus government incentives to hire older workers. After reviewing the costs, we found it would add about 75 cents per shirt. Gail and Barry weren't on board, but both sons, Amy and Ralph, thought it was worth exploring, especially with the Made in America appeal. Debbie had just given birth to our first granddaughter, so she couldn't travel. I went with Jerry and Amy to visit potential locations. We found a perfect mid-sized building in a rural area that used to be a shirt factory. The local governments offered grants and incentives, making it an attractive option. However, Gail strongly opposed it, pushing for outsourcing to China for higher profits. I refused, saying, "This company will never move out of the country. It's about pride, not just profit." Jerry later pointed out that even if we made shirts here, the fabric would still come from China. However, he had a solution. A nearby American fabric plant that could meet our needs, adding about 50 cents per shirt, but making the product 100% American-made. Together, these changes would increase costs by $1.25 per shirt. Ralph and Amy supported raising prices to match the higher quality. Gail continued to object as she sourced her denim cheaply from Malaysia, boosting her division's profits. We started to disagree more frequently. At 24, Gail had changed. She wore designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and drove a Lexus. Her focus had shifted, and it was clear that money was clouding her judgment. Since Debbie ran errands for me, I gave her my company SUV and drove my truck to work. Ralph got the same SUV model, thinking we'd get a better deal buying two. Amy called me for a meeting. She had taken over HR after our original hire got caught in a pill sting, which we didn't expect. At 53, Amy had the right qualifications and was now managing HR for 225 hourly workers and 40 salaried employees across our operations. It was time to implement a health plan. Amy invited me to the sewing plant, where she had been staffing the operation for 6 weeks. The plant was almost ready to produce its first shirts, though still not fully staffed. I flew in on Friday to check on the progress. Amy greeted me with a big hug at the airport, and I realized how long it had been since my last relationship. It had been 4 years since my split from Kathy, and 3 since we started the company. I hadn't dated in almost 2 years. Noticing me glance at her, Amy teased, "What are you doing?" I blushed. "Just enjoying the view." She laughed, joking that some people thought I might be gay. We arrived at the plant, where I noticed tents and a crowd gathered. It turned out to be our first annual company picnic. Amy introduced me to the employees as the founder and CEO, and I was touched by the applause. I made sure to talk to each employee and their families. The highlight was when the oldest employee, a 67-year-old grandmother, presented me with the first shirt made at the plant. I had it monogrammed by Mavis, framed and hung in my office. The company was thriving. Greg kept our finances stable, and Mavis and her team worked on new product designs, including a long tail line of collared shirts with a larger raccoon logo. We were also developing jackets with an even bigger logo. Mavis, now 65, even made a stuffed raccoon toy for her granddaughter, complete with wings. During a rare half-day off, I stopped by to see Mavis, who admitted she missed sewing but was proud of her work. When I asked about her retirement plans, she hugged me and said, "Not until you run me out. I've never been happier and am so grateful for this opportunity." I smiled and replied, "You'll probably outlast me." I was captivated by the stuffed raccoon Mavis made, so I had her make one for my granddaughter, which became her favorite toy. Mavis even made one for me that I kept on my desk. After a year of seeing it, I realized the potential. No stuffed animals were made in the U.S. anymore. I put Jerry in charge, and a month later he had a plan. We set up a small factory with 14 employees using older machines, which produced high-quality toys. Gail opposed the idea, but I made the factory independent and owned solely by me under the Redneck Chic license, which appeased her. Since Mavis designed the raccoon, I gave her 25 cents per toy sold, and her quarterly checks rivaled her salary. Gail, now mostly at the jeans plant, had a new boyfriend, and Greg wasn't impressed with him. Meanwhile, we signed Will Turner, Mavis's nephew and a rising race car driver, and his wife Mary as endorsers. Initially hesitant, Mary eventually embraced our brand, modeling our jeans and shirts. Will promoted our products at the racetrack, handing out hats and shirts, and even launched our long tail line. When we raised prices after going all-American, sales dipped briefly. So I posted a video explaining the price hike and used the phrase, "How much is your country worth to you?" Sales quickly rebounded. The stuffed raccoons became a hit, and we donated them to factory workers in local hospitals. ESPN featured Will handing out toys, nicknaming him the Raccoon Fairy, which caught on among his fans and fellow drivers. His car even featured the raccoon logo, boosting his popularity, especially with kids. As demand grew, we doubled the toy production. However, the stress of expanding the company and long work hours caught up to me, and I collapsed from exhaustion. My doctor warned me to start exercising and delegating more, or I'd face serious health issues. Surrounded by my family and team in the hospital, I realized it was time to make some changes. Debbie and Maria gave me a hard time, saying I needed to live long enough to meet my grandson due in 6 months. Maria also revealed she was pregnant, showing me her engagement ring and teasing, "You've got a lot to live for, old man." They joked that I needed a wife to keep me alive long enough to nag me to end of life. Amy and others stopped by, and Ralph and Barry teased me about taking it easy. What surprised me most was Amy, who was emotional and scolded me for not realizing how many people depended on me. Mavis, too, hugged me tightly, crying and making me promise to take care of myself. After 3 days in the hospital, I returned to the office where production stopped as everyone hugged me. Amy and Mavis then set up a schedule where I would work until lunchtime, then go home to rest. Amy often joined me for lunch to ensure I ate healthy, keeping me from indulging in fast food. I came to enjoy these lunches, especially since Amy and I hadn't spent much time together before. We talked about our lives, and I shared my experiences with failed marriages due to cheating. Amy opened up about her own divorce 6 years ago, sharing her hatred for cheaters and how she was glad to be rid of her ex-husband. I asked if she was seeing anyone, and she joked that her boss kept her too busy for a relationship. I laughed and admitted that while I had once sworn off marriage, I was rethinking it, believing that I could eventually find the right woman. The conversation shifted when Amy mentioned Gail's talk of moving the jeans operation to China. Gail had been spending more time at the main office and was engaged to someone Amy didn't like. Gail seemed frustrated with being a business owner instead of pursuing her original dream of being a fashion designer. And she still resented not getting a 50-50th split when we set up the business. I was surprised, as I had felt 35% was generous, considering I came up with the concept, name, and funding. It made me think that perhaps it was time for us to part ways. Amy seemed surprised, especially since Gail was her niece. "I don't think that's a good idea. Gail needs your guidance, and she wouldn't do nearly as well on her own," I grunted. "Just talking, but make sure she knows. No part of my company is going to China. We're making good money, and 300 Americans depend on us, not counting our suppliers." Amy nodded. "I'll tell her, but if she pushes, do what's best for the company. I trust you to make the right call." She held my hand for a moment before realizing and pulling back. We promoted Jerry to help with daily operations, and Ralph took on more of my duties. Since I was working half days, Debbie became Ralph's assistant. I knew something was up when Greg invited me to lunch on Sunday. Both Debbie and Maria were pregnant. Debbie was 7.5 months along, and Maria was 5.5 months. During a quiet meal, I finally asked, "What's going on?" The women left, and the boys hesitated before telling me the issue. "Dad, Mom is in bad shape. She lost her job, caught her husband cheating, and her house is in foreclosure. Can we help her?" Greg explained they had found her an apartment and would cover the first year's rent and utilities, while Jerry would add her to his phone plan. Then Jerry added, "She needs a job. Gail's assistant just quit, and we think she'd be a good fit. Gail might be more polite since she's our mom." I didn't like the idea, but reluctantly agreed. "Fine, but keep her away from me. If she causes problems, she's out." The boys were relieved. "Thanks, Pop. You won't even know she's there." Maria and Debbie hugged me, clearly happy with my decision. Maria said, "You're a good man, Papacita." Debbie whispered her thanks, adding that she'd been against letting Rosalind move in with them. I told Amy about it at lunch on Tuesday. She wasn't thrilled. "Are you sure? You don't need more stress?" "I'll manage. She's their mother, and Gail will keep her busy." Amy laughed. Gail wasn't happy, but I used all my HR skills to get her to accept it. She's calmed down a bit since. Rosalind arrived the next week and immediately started complaining. Her apartment was too small, the commute was too long, and she didn't like Gail. Greg and Jerry had a talk with her. "We're doing our best, Mom. If you don't like the apartment, you can move, but you'll have to pay your own rent. Gail can be tough, but maybe you can be a good influence. If you can't handle it, we'll help you find another job." That shut her up. She knew she wouldn't find a better job. and the thought of paying her own way didn't appeal to her. I saw her 2 weeks later at a meeting. She'd gained some weight, had shorter hair, but still had those striking blue eyes. She greeted me. "Zach, how are you?" "I'm fine, Roz. How have you been?" She didn't like being called Roz, but she kept calm. "I've had better days. Thanks for your help. It means a lot to me and the boys. So, how do you like being a rich business owner?" "A bit different from what we imagined years ago." I smiled. "Didn't expect a crowd of grandkids either. Can't wait to meet our grandsons." Before I could say more, Amy walked over and put her hand on my arm. There was some silent tension between her and Rosalind, like a mental standoff. Amy then said, "Time to start the meeting, Zach. Let's keep it short. I want to try that new Mexican place for lunch." She addressed Rosalind with a dismissive, "Rosalind!" And I saw Rosalind tense up. Trying to lighten things, I said, "Let's get to business. I'll see you at Jerry's house for lunch on Sunday." Amy gripped my arm tighter when I mentioned it, and I began wondering, was she jealous? During lunch, I caught Amy's eye a few times. She asked, "What, do I have food on my blouse?" "No, just a question. Do we still contribute to the Giles Center? If so, can you get me 2 tickets to Jersey Boys?" She nodded. "I'm sure I can arrange that." "Great. Now a business question. If I take an employee as a date, would that be an issue?" She looked serious. "I wouldn't recommend it. Relationships with employees can lead to trouble, especially if they end badly. Don't mix business and personal life, Zach." I pretended to be disappointed. "Too bad. I was hoping you'd go with me. I know you love musicals." She nearly choked on her tea before recovering. "You'll pick me up at 6. We'll have dinner at a nice restaurant I choose, and we'll attend the show as corporate officers, supporting the center. This is strictly a business event, not a date. Clear?" "So that's a yes?" I asked. "Yes, now finish your lunch. And don't touch the salt shaker or you won't be able to applaud on Friday." I sent her flowers on Friday with a card reading, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Debbie heard about the flowers and confronted me. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic." I tried to downplay it. "Just a gesture of appreciation." Before she could say more, Maria burst in. "Is it true?" she asked Debbie, who nodded. Maria grinned and said, "Just so you know, Amy took a half-day vacation, so did we. We're going for a spa treatment and shopping. You better appreciate this." Maria cut me off. "Give it up, Pop. She's been into you for about a year. She nearly collapsed when you got sick. Men are clueless. I've seen how you look at her when she's not looking. You want her just as much." Debbie jumped in. "Don't screw this up. If you do, Sunday lunches with your grandkids will be a thing of the past." I leaned back and smiled. "What happened to my right to privacy?" "Long gone. Good luck, Papacita." Maria laughed as she and Debbie left. I sent Amy flowers Friday morning with a card that read, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Within 45 minutes, Debbie stormed into my office. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic," she teased. I shrugged. "Just a gesture of appreciation, no big deal." Maria then charged in, grinning. "She took a half-day vacation, Pop. So did we. We're all going for a spa day, followed by shopping. You better appreciate it." I tried to protest, but Maria cut me off. "Face it, Pop, she's into you and you want her too." Debbie added, "Don't blow this. You need her, and she needs you. Plus, we could use a better mother-in-law." I gave in. "Anything else?" Maria checked her watch. "Yeah, Greg and Jerry are coming to take you shopping for a new suit. You're not wearing that old stuff. And forget your truck. A limo will pick you up. This non-date is going to cost you, but you're rich. You're welcome." Greg and Jerry walked in just as she finished, and everyone laughed, except me. "Let's get you a suit that's actually from this decade," they said. I sat in the limo, feeling like a nervous teenager on a first date. When I got to Amy's house, I admired her well-kept yard. Neat, attractive, and beautiful, just like her. When she opened the door, I was speechless. She wore a perfect little black dress, conservative yet sexy, knee-length, and perfectly fitted to her curves. Her hair was styled in an elegant semi-bun, understated but alluring. She let me squirm for a moment before saying, "For God's sake, Zach, say something." I blurted out, "You're so beautiful." She blushed and giggled. "Thank you. Glad to know your daughters-in-law's efforts weren't wasted. I feel like a princess." I smiled. "They're getting upgraded in the will, and I mean it. You're beautiful. Come, princess. Your carriage awaits." She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, took my arm, and we headed out. We went to a new Thai restaurant. Amy loved spicy food, but I couldn't handle it as well. She ordered both spicy and mild dishes, feeding me small bites while I wiped my brow. Afterward, we walked to the venue on the warm evening, and I got used to the feel of her hand on my arm. The performance was excellent, and we had some of the best seats in the house. She held my hand the entire time. Afterward, she said, "Thank you so much for tonight. I loved it." "Me too. Too bad it's over," I replied. She stopped. "Over? Who said that? I'm keeping you up past your bedtime, and if you're lucky, I might tuck you in." I blushed, and she laughed. We went to a club that catered to our age group, with a Beatles tribute band playing. She excused herself, and when she returned, her hair was down for the first time, long and beautiful. We sipped drinks and enjoyed the music. She was itching to dance, so I asked, "Wanna?" and she dragged me onto the floor. I wasn't great at dancing, but the slow dances made up for it. She pressed close to me, and we took breaks for me to catch my breath. At one point, her friends Jerry and Sky stopped by. Sky's ankle hurt, so I asked Jerry to dance with Amy. She looked at me, and I nodded, watching her dance happily. After a few fast songs, they returned when a slow one began. "Thank you," she said. "Most men would be jealous," I smiled. "They're your friends, and I want you to have fun. But if it were a stranger, I'd expect you to say no. If you're with me, you're with me." She giggled. "I'm with you, honey." We had coffee with them afterward, and they gave us a card for their dance studio. Before we left, we signed up for lessons. In the limo, I told her, "You don't need lessons. I used to teach part-time. It'll be fun, and dancing with the same partner makes you better. Plus, it'll get you in shape, better than bowling," she said with a smile. I didn't mess things up by trying to come in after walking Amy to her door. I did get a few nice kisses, which was enough for now. On Sunday, before Rosalind arrived, the girls teased me, and the guys asked if I'd scored, while their wives playfully scolded them. When Rosalind arrived and saw the smiles, she asked, "What's everyone so happy about?" Jerry grinned and said, "Pop went on his first date in over 2 years and had a great time." It wasn't entirely true, but no one corrected him. Rosalind didn't seem amused, which dampened the mood until Ashley, their 2-year-old, woke up and lightened the atmosphere. Rosalind noticed Ashley's raccoon toy and commented, "How cute! It looks familiar." Jerry explained, "It's from our company. We make them near the shirt factory and sell them online and in select stores. We've sold quite a few." Rosalind rolled her eyes. "Great, more money for you." Jerry, clearly offended, explained, "Actually, it's a non-profit foundation. Every dollar after costs goes to the Wounded Warrior Foundation to help disabled veterans with things like ramps, guide dogs, and housing modifications." I wished he hadn't mentioned it. We didn't do it for the recognition. It all started when Jerry's best friend, who lost both legs in Afghanistan, needed help. We built ramps for his house, and it led to the idea of creating the foundation. Gail insisted we keep it separate from the business so it wouldn't affect her earnings. Bob, Jerry's friend, now works for us and oversees donations. Rosalind apologized, and the rest of the afternoon went smoothly. On Monday, I received an email outlining the events I'd be attending to represent the company. Fridays and Saturdays would be busy for a while. I was still working half days and considering making it permanent. Amy joined me and Mavis for lunch, but didn't bring up the weekend. She asked if I'd seen the memo about more community involvement, which I had. When Amy kissed me goodbye and called me honey, Mavis's eyes widened, and she immediately pounced. "So, you and Amy? About time. She loves you, you know." I raised my hands. "We're just friends. No one's talking marriage." Mavis gave me a look. "Uh-huh. Well, when that wedding happens, I'll be sitting on the groom's side." Later, Mavis hinted that she and the girls were working on something but wouldn't tell me what. On Friday, she made sure Amy was with me for lunch, and I knew something was up. After lunch, Mavis invited me to the shop, where the girls were grinning. "You told us to experiment, so we did," Mavis said. "Get ready for a fashion show." The fashion show was mostly grandchildren, ranging from 8 months to 6 years, all wearing clothes with our logo. I'd thought about a children's line before, but never had time to develop it. Mavis knocked me to it, and I was impressed. The designs were clever, like a jumper on the 8-month-old with a raccoon in diapers and a dress on a 6-year-old featuring a mother raccoon with her babies. Debbie's daughter Ashley wore red overalls with raccoon heads on the bib. We introduced the baby raccoon line online, and it sold out in 2 weeks. Everyone loved it, except Gail, who stormed into my house while Amy and I were having lunch, furious. "You a-hole, I'm the designer," she yelled. We were stunned. I tried to reason with her. "No one's undermining you. I asked about a kids' line 2 years ago and you focused on jeans. Now feel free to design as much as you want." She ranted some more and left. Amy sighed. "She's losing it." Her husband's spending money they don't have, and she can't say no. He knows she has millions, but doesn't understand the difference between working millions and spending millions. Worse, he talked her out of a prenup. I was shocked. There's a clause in our agreement that requires a prenup to protect the business. What was she thinking? Meanwhile, things between Amy and me progressed nicely. We attended concerts, plays, and sporting events, including races. Will was winning consistently and had a shot at Rookie of the Year in NASCAR. We expanded our monogramming and shirt factories to keep up with demand, and Forbes featured us on the cover as a true American success story. As Amy and I grew closer, Gail's marriage began to deteriorate. I could sense trouble coming. We attended the annual picnic at the shirt factory. The food was great, and the employees, mostly women, competed fiercely in the dessert contest. Prizes ranged from $50 to $250, and the winner was a coconut cake. The local mayor and county commissioners judged the contest, and the event made the local papers, along with a few photos of Amy and me goofing around. One photo showed me smearing cake on her face, and another caught her kissing me in revenge. The caption identified us as the company's owner and his wife, which the kids found amusing. At the hotel afterward, I was surprised when the clerk gave Amy and me key cards to the same room. Before I could protest, she hurried me along. I got tired of waiting. If I left it to you, we'd be in walkers before anything happened. Now don't screw this up. It had been a long, dry spell, and Amy made up for lost time that night. I managed 2 performances and a third at 6 a.m. The dance lessons had definitely helped. Amy outshone both my ex-wives in every way, throwing herself completely into our time together. At 50, Amy was still trim and beautiful. She made me wait in the living room while she changed, and when she finally emerged, she was wearing a sheer teddy robe and high heels. She twirled, teasing me. "Do you like this?" she asked. Once I regained my speech, I said, "You're beautiful, but it would look even better off you." She giggled. "Then it's only fair you take it off." We made love again, and afterward, I held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, we showered together and made it to breakfast with the family. Debbie teased Amy, saying she was glowing, while Greg joked that I looked like I didn't get enough sleep. They all laughed, but I surprised them by announcing we were staying a few more days. I wanted to visit the toy factory and spend more time with Amy. Mission accomplished. On the flight home, I asked, "How long until you move in?" Amy smiled, taking my hand. "I plan to spend a lot of time in your bed, but I'm not moving in right away. We need to make sure everything's right. And just so you know, I'm an old-fashioned marriage kind of woman." "Does that scare you?" I replied. "The only thing that scares me is not being the one you want." She held my hand for the rest of the flight. The first night home without her was rough. I kept waking up, reaching for her. The next day, we struggled through lunch with Mavis, who quickly caught on. Later, Amy promised to bring a suitcase over, just in case. She decided to stay more often. A week later, Rosalind unexpectedly showed up at my office. She wanted to talk, but I told her to get to the point. After some fidgeting, she finally began reminiscing about our past and asked if we could start over. I cut her off, reminding her of her affair, the hurtful things she said, and how she tried to screw me over in the divorce. I told her that too much had happened and that we couldn't go back. I advised her to be grateful for what she had. Before I could say more, Amy walked in and coolly acknowledged Rosalind. "Lunchtime, honey. Should we have Mexican delivered to the house later so we can relax?" Rosalind sat speechless, and I couldn't help but enjoy it. Taking Amy's hand, I said, "Roz and I were just talking about old times, but I'll save the rest for another day. See you Sunday." We left before Rosalind could react. At lunch, Amy noticed the look on my face. "What's on your mind?" "Everyone knows we're together. I knew she was in your office as soon as your door closed. She needs to learn. I don't share. If she thinks otherwise, she needs to find a new playground. I protect what's mine." I grinned. "So, I'm yours?" Her expression softened. "Yes, you've been mine since the hospital when I realized I was falling for you. Can you handle that?" "I'm out of my league, but I'll spend as long as it takes to make you happy." She ran to the restroom in tears, but her kiss when she returned told me I hadn't messed up. I started looking for a ring while she talked about redecorating. I told her anything was fine, as long as she left my office alone. We were both happy. 2 weeks later, while I was browsing honeymoon brochures, my secretary called. "There's a woman here who says she's your wife." I was confused. Everyone knew Rosalind by now, and Amy hadn't said yes yet. I thought it was a joke until Kathy walked in. "Hi, Zach, surprised?" she asked, dressed to impress. More like disappointed. Why are you here? Her smile faded. I wanted to apologize. Remember my letter? I never read past the first line. Why? She asked, trying to stay composed. Because I was in too much pain. I loved you for 6 years, but then I found out you've been sleeping with clients for commissions. That's what some people call being paid for sex. She struggled to control her temper. What do you want, Kathy? She admitted she was broke, having sold her house to keep her business afloat, but it failed anyway. Rumors about her spread, and she lost clients. Now she had no money left and asked for help. Part of me felt some satisfaction, but another part felt pity. I wrote her a check. This is for the good years we had, but you need to leave town. I'm proposing to my girlfriend today, and I love her more than I thought possible. I'll try to remember our good times. Her eyes widened at the check, but I cut her off when she tried to thank me. Just take it. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't betrayed me. Your actions pushed me to find success. She asked for a goodbye hug, but I refused. No, don't ask why. You won't like the answer. Just then, Amy walked in. Hi, honey, I just need... She saw Kathy. Sorry, I'll come back. I took her hand. No need to wait. Miss Myers was just leaving. I guided Amy out of the room, leaving Kathy behind for good. As soon as we turned the corner, Amy pulled me against the wall, kissing me passionately. I know who she is, she said. I started to explain, but she put her hand on my lips. No need. I can be jealous and you're mine. No more ex-wives I don't know about? I shook my head. No. Good. I trust you, but you're too soft-hearted. It's a good thing I'm here to keep you in line. Now, don't you have something to ask me? It didn't go exactly as I'd imagined, but I got down on one knee and took out the ring from my pocket. People were passing by, secretaries and assistants heading to lunch, floor managers carrying paperwork. They all stopped and stared. As you said, I'd be lost without you. I think I need a little more supervision, and the only way to get that is by having you with me forever. Amy, love of my life. It took me 2 tries, but I believe I found the woman I was meant to be with. Please, baby, marry me. It wasn't the romantic speech I had hoped for, but I got my point across. I think everyone in the hall was holding their breath as she knelt to my level. Yes, she said. Plain, simple, and exactly the word I wanted to hear more than anything in my life. People clapped and cheered, but neither of us noticed. We stayed on the floor, kissing for nearly 5 minutes, long enough for the kids to come running down the hall. Maria and Debbie pulled Amy up, and the 3 of them hugged, dancing in a circle. The boys just stood there, grinning. Stop smirking and help an old man up, I told them. They pulled me to my feet, and the girls grabbed me while Amy hugged Jerry and Greg. Within 40 minutes, the news had spread across both plants. An hour later, Mavis called. Remember, I sit on your side of the church, she reminded me. I wished I could have seen her face. You won't be sitting much. Since my parents have passed, you'll be the mother of the groom. She couldn't speak, so she hung up. The date was set, and Amy had moved into my house full-time. We had a long talk about the future. I think I'm going to retire. The boys are doing well, and Ralph will still be around to guide them. I'll stay on as CEO, but only step in if they hit a deadlock or need advice. If you retire, I retire, she said. All right. Please, honey, she teased. Like I'm going to let you wander around alone. My new full-time job will be keeping an eye on you. Everyone was thrilled about the engagement, except Gail. She hadn't been happy about much lately. She finally put an end to her husband's reckless spending and told him to get a job if he wanted extra money. He had quit working the day after they got married. He exploded in anger, withdrew as much as he could from their accounts, and left. Then he sued for divorce, asking for alimony and half of her share of the company. Barry did his job. He brought up the partnership and corporation papers that clearly excluded the business from being community property. It was a gray area, but Barry made it clear he could drag things out for years, and her husband would be paying his own fees unless a lawyer took the case on contingency. Barry had a solid reputation, and most lawyers were hesitant. In the end, Gail had to pay him $1.5 million to make him go away. Gail came out to our house for lunch with Amy and me. She looked exhausted and frustrated. I want out of the company, she said bluntly. I want to take the jean business and the brand. You can have the rest. Can we work something out? That night, Amy and I discussed it. She said it wasn't her decision, but I reminded her that we were going to be life partners, and every choice from now on would affect both of us. We consulted Barry, who brought in an independent firm to appraise the business. In the end, we split it the way Gail proposed. She took the jean company and kept the Lardic brand. I had to pay her $2 million in cash to buy out her remaining equity. Amy tried to convince Gail to stay, but Gail was determined. I've learned a lot. It's time for me to move on and follow my own vision. After the paperwork was signed, Gail closed the factory and moved her business to China, leaving the locals devastated. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. What I could do, however, was buy the equipment and restart under a new brand. Amy came up with our new logo, Livin' Large, featuring 2 big red L's on the pocket. We updated our website, sent out memos, and posted on YouTube to explain the change without bad-mouthing Gail, though people figured it out. Gail thrived for 3 years before selling her company to a Chinese syndicate and opening a design house in LA. Meanwhile, innovation thrived in our company, and Maria came up with a new idea, working with Mavis on the Punk Raccoon line. Instead of the familiar cute logo, the raccoon had black bat-like wings and red eyes with skeletal outlines. We launched hoodies and tees using kids from the community to spread the word. Amy and I eventually married, and I met her son, who had just graduated from college. We brought him into the business, with Greg and Jerry helping him along. Rosalind remarried and moved away, which, while unspoken, brought relief to the boys. Sunday dinners have become big family gatherings. Amy and I are mostly retired, attending only a monthly board meeting. Our honeymoon was a world cruise, and we loved it so much that it's now an annual tradition, taking the grandkids along to give the parents a break. Life has been good. As for Mavis, she retired for 6 months, then called me one day. "Do you know who Ozzy Osbourne is?" she asked. "Yes, Mavis." Good, because I'm quoting him. Retirement sucks. "When can I come back?" I laughed and told her, "As soon as you can walk through the door." She's still going strong.
###. From street to success, a 12-year journey. John, a middle-aged carpenter with a kind heart, walks through the bustling city streets, reflecting on a day 12 years ago that changed his life. On a cold, rainy evening, he noticed a 10-year-old girl, Emily, huddled in a doorway, begging for food. Moved by her plight, John offered her a meal and shelter. This simple act of kindness blossomed into a deep bond, providing Emily with the stability and support she needed. Years later, Emily, now a successful software engineer, honors John at a high-profile tech event, revealing how his belief in her transformed her life. Hello, my friends. I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. John, a middle-aged man with a warm demeanor, navigated through the bustling city streets. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden hue over the skyscrapers and bathing the city in a soft amber glow. As he walked, John's thoughts drifted back to a day 12 years ago that had changed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. The sounds of traffic and the chatter of people around him faded as his mind wandered back to that cold, rainy evening. John had always been a man of simple means, working diligently as a carpenter. He had a kind heart and a steady hand, qualities that endeared him to his clients and friends. Yet there was a restlessness within him, a sense that he hadn't quite fulfilled his purpose. This feeling often led him to reflect on his past, especially on that particular night that seemed so distant yet vividly present in his memory. 12 years ago, on a cold and rainy evening, John had been walking home from work, the city's streets almost deserted under the relentless downpour. His coat was soaked through, and his breath came out in visible puffs in the chilly air. As he hurried along, eager to reach the warmth of his modest apartment, he noticed a small figure huddled in the doorway of a closed store. The girl was young, around 10 years old, with matted hair and clothes that clung to her small frame, drenched and dirty. She was holding a cardboard sign with shaky handwriting that read, "Please help. Need money for food." John's heart ached at the sight. He slowed his pace, his eyes meeting hers. They were wide and filled with a mixture of fear and hope, a look that tugged deeply at his conscience. John approached the girl cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there," he said gently, kneeling to her level. "My name's John. What's yours?" She hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to swoop in and take away her chance of getting help. "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. John smiled warmly. "Emily, are you hungry?" She nodded, her eyes wide and cautious. "Come with me," he offered, extending his hand. "Let's get you something to eat." They walked together to a nearby diner, John holding an umbrella over Emily as she shivered beside him. Inside, the warmth enveloped them, and John ordered a hearty meal for Emily. She ate ravenously, and as she did, John gently coaxed her story from her. Emily had been living on the streets for several weeks after her mother, a single parent struggling with addiction, had disappeared. Emily had no other family to turn to and had been trying to survive on her own. As Emily finished her meal, John faced a decision. He couldn't bear the thought of sending her back out into the cold night. "Emily," he said softly, "I have a spare room at my place. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. Would you like to stay there for a while?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, please," she whispered, her voice cracking with relief and gratitude. John led her to his modest apartment, a small but cozy space filled with handmade furniture and the smell of fresh wood. He showed her to the spare room, which he quickly prepared with clean sheets and blankets. Emily looked around, her eyes wide with wonder and gratitude. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Over the next few days, John and Emily began to form a bond. They shared meals and conversations, and John learned more about Emily's past. She was a bright and curious child, despite the hardships she had faced. She talked about her dreams, her love for books, and her longing for a normal life. John listened, offering comfort and understanding. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Emily asked, "Why did you help me, John?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with kindness. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Emily. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe in you." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. John knew that providing temporary shelter was only the first step. He wanted to give Emily the stability she needed to thrive. He began by enrolling her in a local school. The principal, moved by Emily's story, agreed to help her catch up on her studies. Emily was nervous on her first day, but John reassured her, walking her to the school gates and promising to be there when she finished. Every day after school, John would help Emily with her homework, encouraging her to pursue her interests. He noticed her fascination with technology and decided to nurture it. He introduced her to computers and basic coding, something he had a rudimentary understanding of. Emily's eyes would light up as she learned, her mind soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Despite the new opportunities, Emily faced numerous challenges. She struggled with her past trauma and the emotional scars left by her mother's abandonment. At school, she sometimes felt out of place, her experiences making her feel different from her peers. John was always there to support her, providing a safe space where she could express her feelings and fears. Emily's resilience began to shine through. She tackled her studies with determination, often staying up late to finish her assignments and learn new coding skills. John marveled at her progress, proud of the young woman she was becoming. He made sure to celebrate her achievements, no matter how small, reinforcing her confidence and self-worth. As the years passed, Emily continued to excel in school. She discovered a passion for technology, particularly in coding and software development. John's modest apartment became a hub of learning and creativity, filled with books, computers, and coding projects. Emily's grades soared, and she began to dream of a future in the tech industry. In high school, Emily's talent was recognized by her teachers, who encouraged her to apply for scholarships. John supported her every step of the way, helping her with applications and essays. The turning point came when Emily was awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university, a testament to her hard work and determination. The day she received the acceptance letter, she ran to John, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We did it, John," she exclaimed, and he hugged her tightly, his heart swelling with pride. Emily's university years were marked by hard work and remarkable achievements. She thrived in her studies, earning top marks and gaining the respect of her professors and peers. She continued to stay in touch with John, frequently visiting him and sharing her successes. John's pride in Emily grew with each passing year, his heart warmed by the knowledge that his act of kindness had set her on a path to success. Upon graduating with honors, Emily was offered a position at a leading tech company. She dove into her work with passion, quickly climbing the ranks and earning recognition for her innovative ideas. Yet, she never forgot the man who had given her a chance when she needed it most. John's influence remained a guiding force in her life, his lessons in kindness and resilience shaping her approach to her career and relationships. 12 years after that fateful night, Emily had not only become a successful software engineer, but also an entrepreneur. She developed a groundbreaking app designed to help children from disadvantaged backgrounds learn coding and technology skills. The app gained widespread recognition, receiving accolades from the tech community and educational institutions alike. Emily decided to launch her app with a special event, inviting influential figures from the tech industry, educators, and the media. She also made sure to invite John, though she kept the details of her connection to him a secret. She wanted to surprise him and show him the impact his kindness had made. On the day of the launch, John received an invitation to a high-profile tech event. Puzzled but curious, he decided to attend. As he walked into the grand hall, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The room was filled with people, and a large stage was set up at the front. John found a seat, wondering what had prompted the invitation. As the event began, Emily took the stage, her presence commanding attention. She began her presentation, explaining the inspiration behind her app and its potential to change lives. John watched in awe, recognizing the young woman before him, but not yet grasping the full connection. Toward the end of her speech, Emily's tone grew more personal. "I want to share a story," she began, her voice steady and filled with emotion. 12 years ago, I was a lost and frightened child, begging on the streets. A kind man saw me, offered me food, and gave me shelter. He believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. John's heart pounded as he listened, the realization dawning on him. Emily continued, her eyes scanning the audience until they found John. "That man's name is John, and he's here with us today. John, could you please join me on stage?" The room erupted in applause as John stood, his emotions a whirlwind of pride, gratitude, and love. He walked to the stage, tears mingling with his. 3. Full circle. Emily continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "John, you gave me a chance when I had nothing. You showed me kindness and love, and you believed in me. Everything I've achieved is because of you. Thank you for changing my life." She presented John with a token of gratitude, a beautifully crafted wooden plaque with the words, "To John, my guardian and friend, thank you for believing in me." The audience stood in admiration, applauding the profound bond between them. The story ended with John and Emily embracing, surrounded by applause and admiration from the audience. Their journey had come full circle, a testament to the transformative power of kindness, a band, and the enduring impact of believing in someone. The warmth of their connection filled the room, inspiring everyone present to believe in the power of giving and the incredible journeys it could set in motion. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.